Above the green expanses of the forest, the bright feathers of the birds sparkled in the sun, creating a magnificent spectacle. The feeling of calm, as well as the harmony in these places, was disturbed by a pack of wild wolves. They moved intently towards their prey, Julia, who could not find an explanation for how she had ended up in this nightmare. Just some time ago, the girl was carefree, going shopping. Just tripping on the street of her city, she found herself in a wild forest. Each of the animals is ready for a decisive throw, while the prey looks scared and vulnerable, trying to escape. The wolves work harmoniously as a team, using their instincts and hunting skills. Just recently, nothing threatened the girl's life, but now she is involved in a fight for survival, which is so difficult for her because her strength is already running out. Her face is increasingly filled with fear. Unlike humans, wolves are very hardy animals, and the outcome of this fight can be predicted in advance. The victim was at a dead end, surrounded by a pack of predators who wanted to quickly deal with him. Julia has no choice but to try to convince the animals that she is completely thin and tasteless, just bones and skin. There is no point in wasting their time. She can only close her eyes and pray for a quick and painless death, and she hasn't even had time to give her first kiss to a sexy guy, let alone get married. The girl is too young to die like this, but for some reason she doesn't feel pain, and when she opens her eyes, the wolves that were chasing her were no longer in front of her. The predators have been defeated and no longer pose a danger to anyone. What a strange nightmare in which a defenseless girl was saved by a cheetah. Or maybe, right now, he will mercilessly sink his fangs in, and this will not be salvation at all. The wild animal, as if in a terrible imaginary dream, suddenly took the form of a man, and he was also naked. He is not driven by the desire to kill the girl, but to do something much more pleasant. The cheetah sees such a beautiful female for the first time. He couldn't even imagine that such cute girls exist somewhere. Her beautiful facial features, large and bottomless deep eyes, are so captivating that it is impossible to resist them. There was only the two of them, no one around. But why was there a completely naked man in front of her? Now she would dream about it. Every touch of his brought terrible, unbearable pain because of the sharpest claws. What in this life did she do wrong when Lady Luck turned away from her? The cheetah saved her from death, but what she must repay in return remains unknown. Like a true gentleman, the stranger considers it necessary to introduce himself. His name is Brad, and he comes from the Cheetah clan. The girl still doesn't know where she is, and she needs to think carefully before giving an answer. If Julia says something strange, she might get eaten, so you need to be proactive and ask the cheetah where she thinks she's from. Since humans evolved from monkeys, it was logical to say that Julia was from the clan of these animals. It's too dangerous in this forest. The girl came up with a story about how she got separated from her clan and got lost. And now she doesn't know where she is, because the cheetah found her. From now on, according to their custom, Julia will belong to him. Having taken on the form of a cheetah again, Brad is forced to take his betrothed into his clan. Sitting on top of the beast, the fur was so soft and fluffy, it seemed like the cheetah had no ill intentions towards her. One can only hope that nothing terrible happens to her in this mysterious world. Being completely naked, only he knows what might happen next, keeping his desires a secret from the girl. Her mesmerizing beauty is difficult to describe in words. Her skin is soft and velvety, smooth to the touch, and her light blush adds freshness. Julia is too cute, and Brad doesn't want her to be stolen by other wolf-hungry males, so only by smearing her with mud will the predator be calm. Like any pretty girl, Julia doesn't like her new appearance, which hides all her beauty. But if she washes her face now, the cheetah will scratch her face, and she will really become ugly and forever. The animal's fiery temperament only confirmed that it was indeed capable of such a thing, but Julia did not want to be convinced of this. There is only one way out. Once you find yourself in the clan, wait for the moment and run away. Perhaps staying with him is still dangerous.
Everything around resembled an unusual zoo. There was unusual but real peaceful, such beautiful ones at that.
Julia had read somewhere before that the indigenous people put paint on their faces to show their status of strength and power, and Brad has more tattoos than everyone else. That is why we can conclude that he is the main one here and has power over the entire clan. The males had many questions when they saw the girl. Why was she so dirty? Where did Brad bring this woman who smelled so good? And whether she had reached maturity. No one dares to look at a female cheetah. They must know their place. Having driven away all the residents, someone from the crowd shouted for them to disperse. The locals couldn't help but notice the stranger. Julia had already managed to rejoice that it would be easier to find a common language with the girls. Are they also from this clan? There is such a big difference between the guys and the girls. Females have big noses and small eyes, wear tank tops when they have fat on their sides. No wonder Brad thinks Julia is beautiful. Cheetah announced to everyone that he found Julia when she was lost, and now she is his girlfriend. Everyone better get out of his way. Brad turns his back to everyone and walks away proudly, his self-esteem having increased many times, having shown off his new girlfriend. The local beauty Sharon is furious. She does not understand how one can be so stupid. Considering herself definitely better than this dirty girl, her friend has the same opinion about her. Brad is simply blind, so he rejects Sharon. He will regret it. The newlywed couple had already arrived at their shared home. In a quiet corner of the forest, surrounded by tall trees, stood an old hut. The caring Cheetah assumed that the girl was hungry and offered to fry meat with a pine and sandalwood aroma. But if the guest did not like such a dish, the owner would find the desired dish later. The girl wanted to try some rice, but Brad didn't like it at all. Just because girls love to eat rice, men die of fatigue working in the fields. So the cheetah can bring her anything she wants, but not that. Farming is so dangerous that these strong beastmen can die, so Julia should have given up. Lightly stroking the girl, Brad says that she is pretty and made the right choice. The whole time the guest was limping, and Brad noticed it. Taking her fragile leg, it became clear that Julia had injured her foot. Kissing him tenderly, the cheetah asks to forgive him for not being able to protect him from this. Once again, he is surprised at how beautiful the girl is. Even her feet are incomparable, showing all his courage and strength. The main character carried the wounded girl in his arms to the local healer. The loud knocks on the door did not leave the owner of the house unnoticed. Looking out of the house, Lucas saw in front of him a guest not empty-handed, but with a wounded girl. He immediately invited the guests into the house, thinking that the wound on the girl's face might have been bitten by bees, and Brad used the dirt to cover her face. A couple of minutes later, Lucas was already informed of what had happened, but his leg still hurt a lot. You need to be patient a little. It will get easier soon. Brad tried with all his might to support his betrothed. She shouldn't worry. Lucas studied medicine at the City University of Animals, and will definitely help. The doctor asked Julia if he could take off her stockings to rub her leg and improve circulation, to which she agreed. The owner of the house was shocked when he saw the girl's naked leg. Damn it, did she do something wrong, or do the animal's legs look somehow wrong? Lucas admired. Her leg was so beautiful, every inch of it so soft and velvety. Brad didn't like what was happening at all. No one dared to look at his property like that and treat it like that. Having asked for forgiveness, the doctor got down to business, wanting to show all his professionalism and help the beauty. In his hands was something strange, not typical for modern medicine and not resembling any medicine. In their world, it is called golden root. It improves blood circulation, thanks to which the leg will heal faster. Despite the fact that it was ordinary ginger, Lucas spoke quite convincingly. And besides, the couple had no other options but to trust traditional medicine. No one dares touch the cheetah woman's leg, so he will do everything necessary himself. Lucas is categorically against amateurism. Everything should be done by a professional. There is no place for emotions and jealousy. Every touch of the man made Julia feel incredibly pleasant, and the pain gradually went away. Brad interrupted the seconds of bliss by pushing the potential rival away from his woman. The jealous person thinks that all this is very simple. He can definitely repeat it, even though he does not have a medical education. The animal instinct makes them fight for a female, especially for the beautiful Julia, who has no equal among the entire clan. The young man takes on the task himself to help his lady, afraid of hurting her. After each of his moves, he asks if everything is okay, creating an awkward situation between them. To further prove his superiority, Brad takes every opportunity to ask if he does it better than Lucas. Cheetah received recommendations on what else needs to be done. All that remains is to monitor Julia's condition. Take the golden root with you, and when you have free time, rub it on your leg. While the men were talking, the girl looked at the room. The further she went into the house, the more questions she had, especially when she saw the hot pepper. It's strange, but they don't use these products for food, but for making medicines. They have no smell, but if you cook them, you can get a dish with an unforgettable taste. Julia would not have forgiven herself if she had not asked where Lucas got all these drugs, and it so happened that he himself offered to take them with him. Brad doesn't want other men to give her such gifts. He can get everything for her himself and be the only partner. In this world, everyone falls in love with each other so easily without any effort, and Lucas also liked the beauty. Among all the exquisite medicines, Julia has already chosen what she might need to prepare a delicious dish in the future, because the girl not only dazzles with her beauty, but also wants to prove herself as an excellent housewife. All the medicines are not dangerous, except for this one, which is called Red Claw. You should be careful with it. Do not touch it with your hands. If it gets into your eyes, it will be very painful. Whether out of concern or jealousy, Brad snatches the bag from her hands and says he will carry it himself. The girl felt much better and could now walk on her own, but the cheetah did not want to deny himself the pleasure of carrying the girl in his arms a little longer and enjoying her hugs. Brad thanks Lucas for his help, but he doesn't dare touch his woman anymore. This female belongs to him, and she can have no one else but Brad, he reminds Julia. Returning home after everything that happened, the girl was hungry. The owner took a huge piece of meat with the scent of sandalwood and tore off the most delicious part for his guest. Next time, he promises to cook the meat with a pine aroma, so the taste will be even more piquant. When I took a bite, the meat turned out to be so dry and completely tasteless. The medicines that Lucas so kindly gave the girl came in handy. Julia suggested cutting them up and adding them to the meat, which should help with the taste. Brad questions this idea, because these are medications and you can't just eat them, but the beauty asked him to trust her. Julia is too sweet, so much so that your heart skips a beat, as if she makes you believe her and do as she says. A wonderful aroma has taken over the whole house. Brad wants to try this meat first. Suddenly it turned out to be some kind of poison. Raising it to his mouth, his fangs slowly and fearfully sank into the piece of meat. It tasted delicious. Brad had never eaten anything better in his entire life. It was the best meat he had ever tasted, and it was also prepared by the hands of a beautiful woman. The insatiable animal wants even more, like a real domestic kitten. Brad asks his owner to feed him by hand. After the cheetah licked the girl's hand, it really did seem like the girl had a loving pet. Brad hadn't felt this way after eating for a long time. He liked the dish so much that he started licking Julia's palm and fingers. This behavior scared the girl, because she doesn't know what the cheetah is going to do next. The predator wants to hunt tigers to repay Lucas for medical help, and Julia can rest in the house while he is gone. Everything around is really striking to the eye. She would like to feel at home here before she returns. The girl must take care of her life here. After some time, Brad returned home and shouted loudly about it so that the woman would come and meet him. After hunting, he came across a strange object and thought it might be Julia's thing, so he brought it here. The handbag really found its owner. The girl was incredibly happy with such a find. There are so many things in a woman's handbag. You never know what and when you might need it. So Julia couldn't even imagine that the panties she had once hidden away could come in handy. Julia doesn't like the way the cheetah calls her a woman. She demands to be called by her name. Brad had to admit that her name was more beautiful than all the other females from the 3 largest clans in the City of Beasts. Whenever he gets a chance, Brad will definitely take her into town so that everyone can see how beautiful this woman is. Julia has never seen and does not know what the mysterious city looks like. In this area, the City of Animals is the largest and most diverse. Telling in more detail, Brad had a strange expression on his face, as if the resident had some bad memories associated with him. Taking Julia's hand gently, the cheetah says that he wants to make clothes for her because the girl's clothes stand out too much. The offer was completely unexpected. She didn't think that the predator could make clothes. Для этого понадобится снять мерки, чтобы создать наряд, который будет подчеркивать и так прекрасную фигуру красавицы. The male instinct kicked in at full speed, and at the sight of her, goosebumps ran down his body and his breath caught. At such moments, the head switches off. The hands reach out on their own, wanting to touch and violate all existing boundaries. This behavior was completely unexpected and outrageous. Julia jumped back and screamed. But Brad thinks that she is his female, and there is nothing wrong with him touching her a little. Fortunately, or unfortunately, having called him a pervert, the cheetah did not understand who it was. After this, Julia's desire to get new clothes completely disappeared, although the animal still does not understand what is going on and insists on taking measurements. Brad didn't want to push her away with this behavior, so he promised that he wouldn't allow himself to do something like that again. A couple of minutes later, Julia's new image was ready and waiting for its time. The girl didn't expect this result at all. All the seams were crooked and ugly. Where did he learn to sew like that? Hoping for a miracle, and even hoping that Brad would turn out to be a supermaster at sewing was clearly in vain, because his clothes were sewn in exactly the same way. This was not the reaction he had hoped for when he painstakingly, albeit crookedly, created his new masterpiece. In order not to upset the creator, Julia had to act like a real actress, as if she liked everything, and the cheetah did a good job. She would put on the outfit right after she washed herself. Brad's imagination pictured her completely naked, the water gently flowing down her skin, giving her a fresh and natural look, highlighting all her graceful lines and grace. He couldn't allow her to go swimming in the river and have other men see it. The male decided that Julia would wash herself in the house, and in the meantime, he would prepare water for her. Having done everything necessary for bathing, Brad said that now they would never be apart from each other and should also wash together. But he did not have time to finish his thought, as the girl kicked him out, believing that now was not the time to move to a new stage in the relationship. The house was too dark with the door closed. It seemed like the male was up to something. The caring owner says that this way other men won't be able to see her body, but she shouldn't sit in the water for too long. If it gets cold, Julia might get sick. If so, then Brad won't be able to see anything either. The girl got angry and slowly began to take off her dirty clothes, exposing more and more of her body parts. Her figure is like a harmony of forms and lines that radiate confidence and femininity. The smooth lines of the hips flow into graceful legs. Brad's behavior is becoming more and more like that of a pervert or a maniac, but no man could resist such a temptation. Only now did it become clear what these feelings were like. But the thought that the predator would now also go crazy over the female like everyone else was already making me go crazy. Every person gets that feeling, like goosebumps running down their skin when they are being watched. And that's exactly what happened. Julia turned around and saw a peeping pervert. This was the perfect moment to hide and avoid an awkward situation. She is so attractive. The cheetah has never seen such a beautiful body. He needs to calm down, relax, forget, and not think about it. It is absolutely impossible. Now all thoughts are only about her. Even after diving into cold water, I could not unsee her naked body. The naive girl forgot that cats can see in the dark. But she is no less guilty. Now she will burn with shame. The desire to hide under a stone, like a cockroach, and never get out of there, is becoming stronger and stronger. Brad returned home. The tension between the couple only increased. It was already late, so it was time to get ready for bed. The owner had made this soft and comfortable bed himself. The male pressed himself against Julia's body to awaken her feelings, because this needs work. The cheetah insisted that she shouldn't worry at all. It was not time to reproduce yet. By pushing Brad away, she clearly demonstrated her unwillingness to reproduce, and to make sure she was completely convinced, she also sent him far away. Hugging Julia from behind, she felt something was wrong, or rather, something extra between them, and realizing what it was, she squealed. It was already hard for Brad to contain his feelings, and the girl was constantly fidgeting, leaving him no chance. An immobilized Julia was forced to remind him that the predator had said they wouldn't do that. But next to her, his heart is beating like crazy, ready to burst out of his chest. All night, Julia was afraid to move and make the wrong move. But in the morning, Brad's patience ran out, and reaching for her neck like a kitten, he licked it. She felt ticklish, and at the same time didn't understand why he did it. Being completely naked, the male stood up and pulled on his clothes. He needed to bring more dirt, because Julia couldn't leave the house without it. The girl still didn't like the idea of the cheetah constantly smearing her with mud, so she came up with something better. Now Julia is ugly enough that other males ignore her. Having drawn freckles on her cute cheeks, she began to think that she looked like a simpleton, not taking into account the fact that here the standards are completely different. But no one would covet her anyway. Since there was nothing to worry about now, and the problem was solved, it was time to show Julia the village that might soon become her home. Only when they arrived at the cheetah tribe did everyone notice the new couple, especially the woman with such white skin and a good figure that Brad brought with him. But it was doubly offensive because her face wasn't that great. There are so many unfamiliar beastmen here. Julia is an outsider here, so it will be difficult to make friends. The best and only solution was to meet girls and make a good impression on them. Julia graciously approached the crowd and introduced herself, hoping for a reciprocal move on their part. As in every tribe, the path to friendship lies through communication with the head of the company and all the females. And this time was no exception. And here she is, Sarah, the trendsetter of fashion and beauty in this area. Her appearance brings back memories of rich ladies who manipulate men as they please. In Sarah's opinion, the female that Brad brought is still far from her beauty. She has spots on her face, and a good figure alone is not enough. The female has entered heat today, and this is a great opportunity to suggest to Brad that they mate to give birth to cubs. The men of the tribe were lining up to continue their lineage with Sarah, but he got ahead of everyone else, and this caused a conflict to start. Their place in the mating queue depends on how much the female likes them. Brad appreciates Sarah's offer and is happy that she will have offspring this year, but he has to decline. No one has ever refused the female. She is furious that someone better than her has appeared. The stranger did not have a special mark of the beast. Everyone thought that she was definitely rejected, and that she does not go into heat at all. To somehow protect Julia, Brad said that the girl was still young, so it was not surprising that she did not have the mark of the beast. Sarah was right. Humans don't go into heat, but no matter how hard Julia tries, she can't keep quiet in a situation like this.
The female certainly didn't expect to hear this when Bread's woman said she was no better. But they should pay more attention to her partners, show them respect, because they love her with all their hearts.
The female ignores them and tries to have offspring with another. In their place, Julia would rather be alone than with someone like her. These words inspired the men. All of them only dreamed of a companion like Julia. The girl can clearly undermine Sarah's authority with such statements. This really pissed her off, because she wants to become popular with men and take the place of the coolest female. Lucas passed by and heard what was being said in the tribe, especially when someone said that if Julia didn't have cubs, then no one would want her, and Sarah had nothing to worry about. He couldn't keep silent and shouted out that love between a man and a woman is not only about intercourse, and Lucas would still like to be with Julia, even if she can't have children. Brad objected. The girl belonged only to him, and it didn't matter at all if Julia couldn't have offspring. In this situation, the doctor could only offer to come to him for medications without any payment if they were ever needed. Julia didn't understand why everyone suddenly decided that she was sterile, since she wasn't in heat. The cheetah smelled something coming from Julia. As usually happens with girls, it starts at the most inopportune moment, when you don't think about it and don't expect it. It was not possible to hide this from others, but there are some advantages. Now everyone knows that Julia is not ethereal. Brad couldn't contain his joy. He was so happy that his girlfriend was in heat. Without wasting any time, he rushed home so quickly that his heels sparkled. The woman from the tribe tried to console Sarah because Julia had just joined the clan. They should be kinder to her. No one could understand all her anger and rage. Someone cooler was found. This cannot be simply left like this and closed eyes. Returning home, Julia was surprised that in this world, the possibility of getting pregnant depends on the menstrual cycle as well as on Earth. But the girl is still too young and not ready for this. Giving birth to babies will be difficult for her, and this is definitely not what she dreamed about. Brad is convinced that the heat means that Julia is ready to give birth to offspring and that she is already an adult. Her first cycle began at the age of 13. It can't be that animals start having offspring so early. The females of their clan have their first heat at 15 or 16 years of age, and the cycle lasts 5 days a year. Any girl on Earth would envy this. At such times, Julia vitally needs pads, but here the females use cotton, which they ask their partners to bring. Brad had already taken care of this and was waiting for praise from the girl, again resembling an affectionate domestic kitten. He was so happy with the usual affection that he ran off to hunt, and Julia was exhausted. It was good that such a simple solution to a current problem was found. Using cotton made it much more comfortable. The whole house smelled something delicious. It was freshly cooked meat, which was so tempting to enjoy its taste. During estrus, it is very important to have a good eat so that the offspring is healthy. That's why Brad overeats so much, because he also needs strength, because 2 people make babies. This situation frightens Julia more and more. The male is completely unable to think about anything other than mating. Brad still can't understand that the girl doesn't want his offspring, and if that's all he needs, it's better to send Julia back to the forest. These words deeply affected the man. It seems that she hates him so much that she would rather die in the forest or be eaten by wolves. The girl is very grateful for everything, and she also likes the cheetah, but their relationship has not yet reached the level of raising common cubs, especially when forced to do so. Only the desire to leave appears. In the forest, besides wild animals, there are also wild males who can chain you up when they catch you. Predators can force you to give birth without rest and beat you if you refuse. They certainly don't care about feelings. Wild males are males that have been rejected by females, such as snakes and lizards. They are unfeeling, cold animals that consider females to be second-class creatures. This couldn't help but frighten Julia. She no longer wanted to pack her things. There are too few cubs in the pack. Brad can't wait to start improving the demographic situation. He can't miss the chance. Otherwise, he will have to wait until next year. A girl can save herself from premature pregnancy only by explaining that she has this much more often than other females, and that every month she will have the opportunity to conceive a child. He had never heard of anything like this before. In all the clans Brad knew, the females only came into heat once a year, even the monkeys. Alas, not only people, men cannot understand what a monthly torture this is for a woman. It is worth getting to know each other better before having offspring, although this is not at all typical for animals. While the couple were discussing their future, the smell of burnt meat began to waft through the house. If Julia doesn't manage to get him away from her by the end of her critical days, she'll have to admit that she's human. Brad's only thoughts were occupied with the future cubs, so she decided to explore the surroundings. Sitting alone with him all day was completely unbearable. While walking, she accidentally met Kylie. Holding a basket of cute kittens, she congratulated Brad the female on the start of her cycle. It turned out that these were not kittens at all, as Julia thought, but her children. Very soon Julia will have little cheetahs, but she doesn't want any offspring from Brad. Her life changed so quickly and unexpectedly that the girl still can't come to her senses, but she is grateful to Brad for saving her. There are not so many beastmen. They are the only ones who can protect women, have children. It is the female's duty. If she likes Brad even a little, then she should try to give birth to him babies as quickly as possible, and the more the better. For people, everything is much more complicated. It is still too early at this age to take on such responsibility. It's not that the girl doesn't want children at all, but only with someone for whom she has feelings. Animals don't understand this. They live by instinct, having one goal, reproduction and procreation. So Brad doesn't listen to Julia's opinion, so the only option is to scare him. Kylie advises the girl to simply say that she can leave him if Brad tries to take her by force. Such a statement will definitely make him take it more seriously. In their clan, if a female doesn't love a man, she can leave him, and those who are left will never be able to start a new relationship, even if the couple was good together. It was horrifying for Julia to hear this. It meant that in this world, males are tied to only one female for life. While the girls were chatting pleasantly, Brad was waiting for his female at home, having collected some more cotton for her. He was already beginning to worry, because it was time for Julia to change the cotton, and when she returned, she announced that she had decided to wait with mating. Brad was furious at what he heard, because it could only mean that she liked someone else and was going to have children with someone else. Julia had no intention of doing anything like that, but if he continued to force her, she would leave. After such words, the girl looked insidious and unfeeling. It was unclear how he could fall in love with someone like that. This answer did not mean a refusal at all. First, you need to get to know each other better, strengthen your feelings, and then you can have as many children as your heart desires. But by breaking the agreement, Brad can only dream about it. The male understood everything and went hunting, while Julia enjoys a wonderful day and is going to collect vegetables and fruits, because pure protein is harmful to health. Vitamins are needed. The search did not last long at all. After just a couple of minutes, Julia had a juicy and refreshing plant in her hands in such heat. While walking through an unexplored area, the girl suddenly fell into a huge hole. She was very scared and faced a serious problem: how to get out of here quickly. Ahead, she saw a stone that could allow her to reach the edge of the pit, but something else was much more interesting. Next to it lay some kind of fabric, so soft and smooth, just like silk, similar to fish scales. Perhaps the beastmen were so skilled in weaving, and someone left it here. Julia decided to take it with her and ask Brad. When the man saw the thing he found, he was horrified. A wild male had crept into the village. It was not fabric at all, but the skin from the molt of an adult snake. An adult snake pleases a female with his skin, and it seems that this one is quite good. Brad even felt ashamed because he was holding this skin in his hands. He needed to burn it urgently so that Julia would pay attention only to him. In no case should you return it and be so careless about the violators. Because wild males are dangerous, you need to not just burn the skin, but gather people and catch the snake. While Brad was going on and explaining everything, he turned around and saw that Julia had already disappeared without a trace. The girl considered it her duty to return the stolen item and wanted to do it as soon as possible. On her way, she met a handsome stranger. He had twice as many tattoos as Brad and long red hair. A cheetah ran after her, shouting to come back quickly because she had met the wild male that Brad had spoken of. Upon grabbing Julia, the stranger realized that she was quite cute and did not have the marital tattoos that signified puberty. Without wasting a second, Brad turned into his cheetah form because his woman was in danger. Not having assessed the capabilities and strength of his opponent, Brad received a severe wound. He did not expect that the villain could have 4 tattoos. Hearing the roar, the entire tribe in the village became alarmed. Something must have happened and they needed to check it out. Having run to the battlefield, everything became clear. The wild snake was holding Brad's female in his arms, and he himself was wounded and lying nearby. The desire to help the cheetah quickly disappeared when they saw 4 marks on the opponent's body. Even in the city of animals, there are only 5 beastmen with 4 tattoos. Brad will not cope with him with his 2 tattoos. If they start a fight, there will be casualties. No one dared to attack, so only he could save Julia. But it was not an equal fight. Only thanks to the girl's persuasion not to touch the cheetah, the snake left him alive and carried her away with him. The cave he had dragged Julia into was his nest, and he was probably about to mate with her right now, even though the female hated the snake and would rather die than lay snake eggs. Her reaction seemed boring to the snake. Obviously, she had not been touched by any man, which meant he could safely and without a doubt make Julia his female. Despite the fact that the villain tried to be polite by saying that his name was Thomas and asked if she needed to eat every day, the girl reacted aggressively, not needing the villain's care. Thomas went hunting and left the female here alone while she was worried about Brad and whether everything was okay with him. The only crazy idea that came into her head was that she could escape because she couldn't stay in the hands of a wild beast. It was better to die while escaping. The attempt to escape was in vain. Having run only a little, Julia was already caught. She didn't expect at all that after grabbing her, Thomas would start licking her dirty foot. He realized that he should have taken the girl hunting with him. Then she wouldn't have gotten hurt running away. Just a few seconds ago, he looked like he was ready to explode. And now he was so gentle. And he also noticed that the spots on her face had become less. Julia's makeup was starting to wear off. She looked great without it, and Thomas couldn't help but notice. There was no point in running anymore, not even trying. The wild snake just didn't want her to get hurt again, so she had to be a good girl until Thomas returned from hunting. Since childhood, Julia was afraid of snakes. She didn't even step on their tracks on the ground. And now she is a hostage of a large python. She still gets goosebumps. If only she knew that she will not get rid of this nightmare anytime soon. Thomas came back from hunting and brought a rabbit. He didn't know that people don't eat meat raw and it needs to be cooked. Having made a fire, the snake began to cook. The first time in his life he did this. He should not expect that it would turn out to be a culinary masterpiece. Most likely, the taste would be disgusting. If it was edible at all, Julia still wanted to eat something other than meat. And when Thomas asked her what she liked, she immediately remembered rice and how angry Brad had gotten when she mentioned it. The beastmen die of fatigue on the farms, and only the males work there to serve the females. But Thomas didn't get angry at all when rice was mentioned. Snakes hate fire, and he probably had never done anything like this before. But to please Julia, he made such sacrifices, even got burned. After eating a small piece, Julia was already full, which meant it was time to go to bed. Hearing such a proposal, the first thing the girl thought was that the male was going to mate with her. And in order to somehow save herself, she could only say that she was not tired yet and would go to bed later. She felt at ease with Thomas. He wasn't as concerned with mating and procreation as Brad. He wasn't even going to approach her at night. Waking up in the morning, Julia realized that she had slept on a snake all night and its tail was still wrapped around her. Thomas planned to go to the farm that day and get some rice. The girl was happy with this news. It was her only chance to eat something tasty. The entire time Julia was held hostage by the monster, Brad had nightmares, seriously injured. He does not know if everything is okay with her and if she is alive. Having received serious wounds that can open up with any sudden movement, it takes time to recover. In this situation, he is powerless, but must save Julia from the beast with 4 tattoos. Lying in the scorching sun in the city of animals, a beautiful woman enjoys the sweet fiery fruits. She is the one who can help Brad save his beloved. The cheetah was beaten so badly that even his own mother could not immediately recognize him when he came to report that a wild animal had stolen his woman. Finally, her son found himself a female, and she didn't even have time to see her. This is unacceptable. Mom promised that the uncles will definitely solve this problem. It's just a pity they won't be able to help, because we're talking about a strong opponent, a tetrabeast. Only Brad's father can deal with him, but he's not in the city now, and for now the beastmen will go in search of Julia. Unexpected guests had already arrived at the sheep farm, and all the herbivores living here were afraid of them and trembled at the sight of them. But everyone could not believe that such beautiful women as the one Thomas was carrying in his arms existed. She must have grown up in a large clan. Everyone was frozen in anticipation of finding out why the couple had come to the farm. There was nothing to hide. The wild snake wanted to take all the rice that was there, and in exchange, he would give an energy crystal, for which you could buy a year's supply of salt for the entire village. This is a real salvation for sheep. With this crystal, they will no longer have to worry about salt for a whole year. The dear customer was given all the rice that was available now, but next month they promised that there would be even more. Suddenly, Julia felt dizzy and fainted. The leader of the tribe was furious and did not understand how it was possible to bring the girl to this. This is not at all a concern for the woman. She could have died if this had continued, and the snake would not have even noticed if she had become a cold corpse. All wild ones are like that. It would not even be surprising if she died from Thomas's care. Getting out of bed in the next room, Julia heard their conversation. She already felt much better and was fine. Last night she was too cold. The snake didn't even cover her with his skin and hug her. But the little woman shouldn't worry. The leader will teach him to care, and the snake won't treat her so terribly anymore. In this world, women were treated much better than Julia expected. She just had a cold, and her blood sugar was low. But he made it look like the girl could die. A decoction of ginseng will warm you up when you drink it. Snakes do not care about females at all. If you are silent all the time and do not speak when you feel bad, then it will definitely come out sideways. Seeing the chieftain's medicines, the same as Lucas's, Julia asked him to take them with him, and as before, the red ones are quite hot, so you shouldn't touch them with bare hands. Thomas picked her up, since she was already feeling much better. It was time to go home. The couple was asked to take salt with them. It is necessary for cooking. If there is no salt in the food, then you can lose all your energy. The tribe suspected something was wrong, so it was decided that the headman would light a smoke signal if this woman was from a large clan. Then they could look for her. The smoke signal did not go unnoticed. Detective William realized that it was a sign that someone had seen the kidnapped woman. It was very likely that it was Brad's woman. It was time to move immediately. Julia hadn't eaten anything all day, so Thomas offered her rice, again not realizing that his girlfriend was used to eating cooked rice, not raw. Even though the snake had no utensils to cook rice in, the housewife found a way out of the situation by using bamboo to cook the food. Cutting bamboo was a breeze for Thomas, using his blade-like nails. This made a good impression on Julia, and he decided to share, but not a nail, as she immediately thought, but a scale. Having checked it on herself, the girl was convinced that not only his nails were sharp, her cut finger was proof of this. Thomas warned her to be careful. If this happens again, he will take away the thing that the girl liked so much. Julia didn't expect the scales to be so sharp. She won't do that again. And besides, he can't take it back because it's a gift. When dinner was ready, the cook could not resist calling him, as she was used to sharing meals with others. After eating the most delicious rice with an amazing smell, it was time to go back to the cave, because it would soon get dark. Thomas has already packed all his things, and because of this, Julia might feel a little uncomfortable sitting on his arm. On the third day of the kidnapping, the villain ordered to come to him. Just a minute ago, he seemed normal. Now it is unclear what he was planning. Grabbing Julia and holding her close, he said he was going to make new clothes for the hostage. She was scared because there were no suitable materials here, and only a female could wear a male's skin, so to avoid any illusions, the girl was forced to refuse. Having torn her clothes off, he left her with no choice. Goosebumps running down her body as Julia imagines putting on snakeskin. The pervert made her bust naked, and unable to restrain his lustful desire, he also touched her to find out how a woman's body felt without clothes. Once again in this world, a man has violated her personal boundaries, and Julia cannot even fight back. Pressing herself tightly against the stone, she tries to hide her most intimate secret. But Thomas tells her to get up, promising that he will not touch her anymore. And if she still does not get up, she will walk around naked. But now she will not freeze because of wet clothes. This arrangement did not suit Julia at all, so she had to stand up and agree to the male's terms. Not only was he a pervert, he was also a liar when he reached out his little hands to her again. When asked who a pervert was, the girl, in a rage, replied that it was a person like him. Julia wanted him to finally stop pawing at her and start making clothes, which is what he did. After trying it on, the clothes turned out to be a bit loose and needed to be hemmed. A couple of minutes later, Thomas returned with a needle and thread and began to demonstrate his sewing skills. The wild snake looked at her so intently, as if he was sure that Julia liked him, but she was just embarrassed to show it. It was very awkward, because he was a villain and kidnapped a girl. But while she was thinking about it, it was time to sew a skirt. She became scared, because if he wanted to touch her there, it would be the end for her. It would be better if it was something long. A short skirt was not very comfortable. Thomas agreed to make it longer, as long as she was happy. But Julia forgot that the skin of a male can only be worn by his female. Then she will not be able to escape from him. Like any girl, Julia was no exception, and just having tried on a new skirt, she could not take it off. She didn't feel safe at all in such a revealing outfit, and wanted to complement her look with a small detail. After several days of searching, they managed to find a clue. A piece of cloth smelled like Brad's woman. The smell of heat had not yet dissipated, so it was decided to split up. This was the only way to catch them. They were very close. Julia could have been saved, but she could not say a word, and when she tried to scream, Thomas plunged her under the water. The snake knew that sooner or later they would come for her. But now Julia is his woman, and he will not give her to anyone. Holding the girl close, he just wanted to make sure that the clothes were dry. Snakeskin repels water, so the chance of catching a cold is negligible. Julia was very hungry and told Thomas about it, but it was better that no one should come across him on the way to the cave. Otherwise, he would leave no one alive. Surely the detectives took all the food from the shelter. Then this is another reason to kill them. Suddenly, a black hawk attacked the couple, and the snake was forced to defend itself and its captive. During the battle, a cry for help was heard throughout the area, and the detectives recognized the voice of William of the Hawk clan. The Cheetah beast sank its fangs into him and released deadly poison, incapacitating its opponent. Seeing the approaching enemies who had come to help, he and Julia jumped off the cliff and dove into the water. They fled, but the warriors still had the opportunity to pursue them until the scent disappeared. It was midnight, and as Julia sat by the fire, she was worried about what would happen to the hawk and how badly it had been hurt. Even if he had 3 tattoos, he wouldn't last more than 3 days. He would die from the injected poison, but the girl was smart and figured out that there was an antidote to any poison. During the conversation, Julia tore off one scale, hurting Thomas. But he was not at all angry. His behavior was completely unpredictable. It's already very late and it's time to sleep. Later, the detectives will still find this place. The couple will have to go far, far away, so that it will be more difficult to find Julia. Thomas decided to go to the sea. If the girl liked it, then they would stay there. And as soon as the heat began, they could start breeding. The females here only come into heat once every 12 months. Julia doesn't understand whether he wants to make babies once a year or every time the pregnancy ends. If they eat well, snakes can give birth on the 30th day. But in winter, when food is scarce, it takes longer. If she stays with Thomas, the house will no longer be a home, and it will be scary to imagine how many eggs she will have to lay. The only way for William to survive is to neutralize the snake's venom. He says not to waste time and energy on him, because the most important thing now is to save the woman. Everyone knows that the snake has 4 tattoos, while their tribe has 2. They can't even take the female, let alone kill the kidnapper. Even William, who has 3 tattoos, couldn't catch the kite. This task is definitely doomed to failure. Near the snake's nest, they managed to find a scale, which was carefully placed on a leaf and smelled like a woman. It could definitely be used as an antidote. Everyone guessed that Julia left it on purpose. It started to rain, and there was a cave nearby, covered with many vines, in which the fugitives gathered to take refuge. Looking in there, a tiger jumped out of it and attacked the snake. He had deliberately hidden there and waited for the right moment, knowing that sooner or later they would look for shelter for the night. Soon he was defeated, and this time Julia already understood how. The sharp scales were to blame. There was enough food in the cave. It was time to light a fire to cook rice. Thomas hugged the girl close to him. Her hair was wet from the rain, so he was worried that Julia might get sick again. The girl refused the offered tiger meat. Thomas can eat everything alone, but he doesn't like fire, and she was confused about how he was going to eat it if he wasn't supposed to like the cooked food. That's right. The snake had no intention of cooking at all. He mercilessly ate him raw. Julia didn't even want to know what was going on there, but just the thought of it sent fear down to her bones. The night was colder than before. The girl had a sore throat, which meant that she might catch a cold again. She was very cold, so Thomas decided to light a fire. The rain might not end soon. They could take advantage of the opportunity and mate, and the rain would wash away their scents, and those males would not be able to find her. The snake is very domineering, but he cares about her so much that while Julia is feeling unwell, he will not dare to do anything. Thomas suggested starting to do it right now, just to warm her up. The female was not at all ready for this, and she managed to get out of it by saying that mating exhausts women, and it could only get worse for her. She could freeze and get tired after this, or even die. Every girl is capable of provocation, and Julia was no exception, adding that he only needed her to lay eggs, and it didn't matter whether she lived or died. Thomas convinced her otherwise. He didn't care about the offspring, he just wanted her to be okay. All women love children, and if the female had given birth to them, she would have loved him more. But Julia did not dream of baby snakes. 3 days later, the sun came out, and it was a clear day. Walking through the forest, the girl came across colorful mushrooms, meaning that they are poisonous. They can poison Thomas and get out. Reaching for them, a snake crept up from behind. These mushrooms were familiar to him, and he knew that they should not be eaten. Playing dumb, she pretended not to know this, saying that it was rare to see so many mushrooms here. It would be a waste not to at least try them. Julia liked other mushrooms, unfamiliar to Thomas. She convinced him that she had eaten them since childhood and had never been poisoned. The mushrooms had to be cooked, and the snake was the first to dare to try them. Thanks to his fast digestion, he was able to quickly understand whether they were poisonous or not. After eating several mushrooms, he collapsed to the ground. Writhing in pain, Thomas hit a bowl of food, which spilled right on him. It was a rare opportunity to escape, but the girl was afraid that he might die. This situation not only showed that the mushrooms were poisonous, but was also a test to see if Julia would leave him. Thomas turned over the food and was afraid that she would be angry. How much better he was than the modern guys, Julia thought. Back in the cave, there was a mess around the extinguished fire that the snake wanted to clean up alone. But Julia couldn't just stand aside and decided to clean up together. In the process, she did not notice and stepped on a small hot splinter with her tender foot. The male immediately crawled up and picked her up in his arms, afraid that she had been badly burned. Having seated her on a stone, Thomas told her not to move, otherwise he would kiss her. He did not expect at all that Julia would be so obedient just because she wanted to avoid such tenderness. Unable to contain his outburst of feelings, the man grabbed her hand and, unexpectedly for the girl, kissed her. It was hard to wrap my head around the idea that all the mushrooms in this world were poisonous. There was no way that Julia wouldn't recognize the tree mushrooms. They were probably toadstools. Thomas ate several different mushrooms, but it was not clear which ones were poisonous. He decided to try again, because the girl still wanted to eat. Julia was against such experiments. She suggested finding a rabbit to test, but no animals eat such things. Sticking to the old plan, Thomas tried first. This time, everything worked out, and the girl was able to have some refreshment. At this time, the search for cheetahs in the city did not stop. 7 days later, one of the detectives came running with the news. A scrap of fabric from Julia's old clothes was found in a cave. The snake is powerful and cunning. It was not possible to defeat it, and it escaped. It remains only to wait for the king of the cheetahs before rescuing the hostage. But Brad cannot wait any longer and goes on a search himself, despite his unhealed wounds. As she walked through the forest, the girl remembered that her cycle was almost over, And when it happened, Thomas would definitely want to mate. In about 10 days, they will reach the sea, where there are beautiful waters that stretch to infinity, which Julia will definitely like. She crosses her fingers and hopes the cold water will delay the cycle, and she just has to keep going. Thomas emerged from the water unnoticed and scared her. If only Julia knew how he had been waiting for this day, always dreaming of swimming with his other half. Suddenly, the girl found herself riding a snake. It was cutting through the water with such speed that her hair was fluttering somewhere behind her. Julia enjoyed this real attraction and happily went to eat her favorite rice. A few days later, a loud noise was heard in the forest. It seemed like wild animals were migrating. The ground is vibrating strongly. There must be a pack of giant beasts approaching them, which are called monsters. They are huge and powerful. The crystal that Thomas used to pay the sheep for rice, he got from the monster. Before, the snake didn't care about them, but now that he has Julia, he needs to be more careful. The sheep still need rice, but now they are too far away, and the flock is very dangerous. There is no way to return. But herbivores also live near the sea. They will have to do without rice for several days. William watched everything that was happening. He couldn't believe that the snake had discovered the pack so quickly. The beasts with 4 tattoos were truly powerful. The hawk's only chance to attack was now. He demanded that Julia be released immediately, otherwise the hawk would kill her. He tried to threaten the snake, but it sounded implausible. The Hawk clan does not give up so easily. His mission will be successful in any case. Failure is unacceptable. If she dies, everyone will think it is the snake's fault. William reported the location of the couple. They were resting near a stream. If Brad walked along the bank, he would be able to pick up the scent. This is what he was going to do. But the hawk dissuaded him, because it could be life-threatening. The bird had a plan to save Brad's woman, but seeing him with only 2 tattoos, he was forced to act alone. In the Hawk clan, everyone is so alienated that even the women do not welcome their company. The fugitives have found a new shelter. Thanks to these boulders, the monsters will not be able to detect them. Despite the inconvenience, safety first. Following the scent, Brad managed to find them. A pack of monsters is heading this way. The cheetah is here to protect Julia, so we need to call a truce to join forces. Thomas allowed Brad to stay to protect the girl, but by offering her a bed, he clearly wanted to show off the kind of relationship they had. The jealous male heard everything. Julia is only his female. He does not intend to tolerate this. As the morning approached, a loud roar was heard. A pack of monsters was already advancing and was very close. The shelter really turned out to be safe. After waiting a little while for the pack to pass by, they went to prepare breakfast. While talking about monsters and whether they would come back again, Julia washed rice and saw the silhouette of a flying bird in the reflection of the water. The hawk dropped an egg right on her head, as if this was his plan to kill the hostage. Seeing this, Thomas grabbed her and lowered her head into the water. Julia thought that because the egg was dropped on her, the serpent was going to drown her. Brad saw everything that was happening and rushed to help the girl, but Thomas told him not to come closer if he didn't want her to die. As Julia emerged from the water and took a breath, she smelled a strong odor. Most likely, the egg that fell on her belonged to the king of the monsters. It's all William's fault. He did such a nasty thing. A pack of monsters approaches, taking Julia in their arms. Thomas rushes as fast as he can to get away. If he continues like this, Brad may say goodbye to life. Hiding in the branches, the cheetah managed to hide, and the monsters left. It remains to hope that Julia is okay. Thomas will never let the girl die, so they haven't stopped to rest yet. The monsters are very resilient. If you stop, they will quickly catch up. But Thomas will not have enough strength to carry Julia. In the end, they will catch up with him. William's plan was to get the snake to drag her, so things are really bad. The girl is dehydrated and needs food. The blood of a dead rabbit will quench your thirst, but not for a human. After taking a couple of sips, Julia perked up and didn't understand what Thomas had given her to drink. It's not the time to be picky, but there really is no blood in any human diet. Even if she had to die, the girl would not drink it. Leaving all talk aside, the snake moved to action. Taking a mouthful of blood through a kiss, he forced her to swallow. For this, Julia thanked him with a slap. She had a terrible feeling in her stomach. She urgently needed to rinse her mouth and wash her face. Her whole body was covered in blood. The smell of that egg still didn't wash off. It was easier to give the girl to the hawk, even if the snake didn't care about his body. Because of the secretions, they were doomed. Sooner or later, the pack of monsters will be forced to stop. Then Thomas will rest, and while Julia drinks the blood of animals, the secretions will be less of a concern. If the snake really loves her, he should not put her in danger, but he also cannot let her go back to the village, allowing her to have other men. In any case, Julia only needs one companion. If she chooses Thomas, then she will not need anyone else, but still he will not allow her to return. In 3 days, they can reach the sea and will be safe. All this time, William was watching them. The couple can't escape, because the pack split into 3 groups and are now converging in their direction. If Thomas doesn't get out of here at one point, he won't be able to survive. Having climbed the tree, it was urgent to come up with some kind of plan, but there were very few options. Either give Julia to the hawk or die. Grabbing the girl by the neck, he made a decision. Out of fear, she suggested another option, saying that she could go herself. When they got out of the trap, they would survive, and the snake would be able to find her in the village. Without further ado, he took off her clothes and, exposing her bust, sank his fangs straight into her chest. After this, Thomas voluntarily gave Julia to the hawk and disappeared, but promised to return for his beloved. The voice of the monsters could still be heard, but the girl was safe in William's arms. Everything would be fine now, and that wild male was no longer here. Julia recognized him. It was the same hawk that made her suffer under the onslaught of a flock of monsters. But she did not blame him at all, because it was for the sake of salvation. The girl still couldn't believe that she didn't die from Thomas's bite. He has such long teeth. You can thank his breasts for their size. It was cold enough that the hawk decided to move some boulders to create shelter from the wind. Just as she had time to remember about Brad, he appeared out of nowhere and rushed into her arms. The cheetah missed her so much that he hugged her tightly. And even hurt, he followed a pack of monsters that was under this rock and decided that Julia was at the top, so he managed to find the girl. When examining her for safety, Brad would notice the tattoos, but Julia couldn't admit that Thomas had bitten her breast, because then he would surely rip her clothes to see. It was not the time to talk about romance and such, although Brad also wanted to leave his mark on her, because he considered her only his female. Julia didn't know whether this meant that she and Thomas were now spouses, but she was sure that she was only 16 and that her mom and dad would kill her if they found out. Right now, the girl didn't want a companion, not Brad, not Thomas, not anyone else. Now, they needed to think not about love squabbles, but to find a way out and get rid of this smell before the pack found them. All this time, Brad was wondering why the pack was here at this time, but it turned out that William stole the egg of the Monster King and threw it on Julia's head, almost killing her. Justifying the hawk, the girl says that she is fine, and if he had not done this, then Brad would not have seen her to this day. Instead of a plan where Julia could die, he would rather she stay safe with that snake. The girl hasn't eaten anything lately and is very hungry, so she has to ask to find something to eat for her. A conflict broke out between the males, each wanting to court the lady, but William was more convincing when he said that by the time the leopard came down from the cliff, he would already be back with the prey. While the hawk was busy hunting, Brad decided not to waste time and threw himself into Julia's arms. After all, he was just a big cat who needed affection. It seems that she simply uses the cheetah for her own purposes, eating his food and living under his roof, but not sleeping with him. While tired Brad slept in Julia's arms, William managed to return from hunting, realizing that the stupid cheetah hadn't even done anything, but he had a better chance of being with a woman. His luck did not give the hawk any peace. Hungry, she quickly ran to the fruit while the hawk was preparing the meat. As he took his prey, his cloak fluttered in the wind. Men in this world should be more modest. No shame, no conscience. Julia apologized for disturbing him. She was ashamed that she was causing so much trouble, because they didn't even know each other. After William's words that men should take care of women, the girl felt offended that there were no such good men in her world, and she almost agreed to stay here. Soon the food was ready, but the hawk had no salt with him, so he warned that it might be a bit bland, although Julia was sure that the taste would be as wonderful as the smell. As night fell, William slept outside. The girl was worried and did not know whether to tell him to come to them, because he might misunderstand. If he didn't come in, Julia would feel terrible because he made the shelter. It was cold outside. She didn't want the hawk to get sick. By morning, Brad again felt how wonderful it was to sleep in the arms of a woman. Hearing a strange sound, he realized that William was also sleeping next to her. The male was determined. And by starting a fight, he woke up Julia, who did not understand what was happening. The cheetah was furious because the impudent man took advantage of the situation and came to sleep next to his woman, having no right to do so. Julia decided to admit that she herself suggested that William sleep next to her. There was nowhere else to hide, and he could freeze. Besides, it was just a dream, and he was far away. Brad held her close so she wouldn't see the naked William transforming from a hawk back into a human. He got a little heated and hurt her nose, so Julia asked him not to cause any more trouble. The girl had a plan to avoid meeting the monsters. She suggested leaving a lock of her hair here, and when she got dirty, leave, so the pack would think that they were still here. Julia's plan appealed to William, and he went off to look for dirt, while Brad stayed to protect her and make faces like a little child. Remembering that he had to take care of the woman, the cheetah ran off in search of food. 2 days had passed, and Julia was still in pain. Perhaps blood was still flowing from her chest. The wound was so deep and healed so quickly, it was as if Thomas had shared his healing ability. The monsters could be heard very close. One of them was next to Brad and was about to rush at Julia. Her heart sank before the danger. The cheetah managed to neutralize the enemy by exploiting his weak spot. The girl ran to help him, remembering that she had a scale that was very sharp. Brad never thought that snake scales could be so sharp that they could kill a monster. Throwing the weapon to the ground, Julia looked at the scale and remembered Thomas. Perhaps it was thanks to him that she was still alive. She also remembered that the snake said that there are energy crystals inside monsters, and this could be the case too. Brad believed, and indeed, it turned out to be true. A transparent crystal can save lives in an emergency. There are also emerald crystals that prolong life. Only herbivorous monsters have them. But they are of incredible size and very difficult to kill. That's why beautiful women always find strong males who kill monsters for them. This is the only way they can always remain young and attractive. William finally came back with the mud. Things are bad. The rest of the monsters are advancing. Julia had smeared her hair. The smell was still there, but barely noticeable. You can only fool the pack's sense of smell if you are far enough away. Climbing onto the hawk's back, the girl asks to take Brad too. His claws will hold another passenger. If the cheetah accepts help from another male, Julia might think that he is weak. The male cannot allow this and refuses the offer, saying that he will think of something. Having swallowed the magic crystal, he jumped off the cliff, leaving no chance for the monsters to reach him. On the way, Julia felt ill. William noticed that she was bleeding, and she confessed that it was Thomas who bit her. But Brad must not know anything. The monsters have caught the girl's scent again. They need to get out of here right now. They continued on their way and met a flock of hawks that looked like William's friends. The Cheetah King returned and ordered one of them to pick up Brad. Julia was safe. In the girl's opinion, everything in the village was arranged so strangely. Suddenly, William flew away, saying that he was going to redirect the monsters so as not to endanger other villages. In the meantime, Brad will take the girl to his room so that she can rest. The castle was surprisingly large in size, but it was not Brad's home, but his father's territory. The room resembled a prison. Everything was so uncomfortable. There was barely any light and a feeling of gloom. Brad must have a lot of brothers and sisters, and his father gave the best room to his favorite son, Julia thought. The cheetah did not hesitate and admitted that he was the king's favorite son. It is accepted here that all the wealth of men is obtained by force. Brad's father raised him as high as he could, but he has been the reigning king of the cheetahs for 20 years now. The castle can only belong to the one who defeats him, and one day the son will defeat his father and become the new king of the cheetahs. Suddenly, a beautiful woman entered the room. Julia thought the young beauty must be Brad's sister until he called her mom. From the bottom of his heart, the son was grateful that she asked his father to help save the girl. He just forgot that hugs are unnecessary because he is no longer a child. He even has his own woman. The girl did not expect at all that Brad's mother, Helen, would turn out to be so young and beautiful. All this thanks to her husband. In the future, Brad will also be able to become powerful and hunt monsters himself. The hostess noticed that the guest's entire face was covered in dirt and offered to bring water to wash. Julia didn't want to bother anyone, and besides, she had applied this dirt specifically to hide the smell. Now something else was important to her, and that was how to break off her marital relationship with Thomas. She had been warned that males could only have one female, and if the relationship broke up, they would not be able to have another, so she wasn't sure she wanted to. Taking the girl by the hands, Brad convincingly said that the snake forced her to be with him, and there was no need to even doubt it. Remembering what she had to endure next to the savage and clenching her teeth, she resolutely replied that she wanted to end it and break off the marital relationship. The Cheetah Queen did not object to the girl's wish and went to prepare the brew, inviting the couple into her room. Because this one was a bit shabby, Brad found it hard to contain his joy at the fact that he would become Julia's only man. The expression on her face did not reflect happiness at all, but rather disappointment. Only now did she realize that in the snake's captivity, she felt safe and everything was fine. Helen handed over a vessel with a prepared decoction that Julia was supposed to drink. She took sip after sip, emptying the vessel, and felt a strange bitter taste. Upon hearing that the concoction was made to ensure that the girl would not give birth to offspring from that male, Julia spat it all out on Thomas, who was standing nearby. While the cheetah was wiping his face, the girl convinced everyone that she was not pregnant and was even still a virgin. No one wanted to believe her, because the marriage seal meant that there was already a connection between the couple, and having given birth to cubs without the paternal love and care of a male, Julia would certainly regret it. A thought came to her mind. She remembered that Thomas had once said that in the Snake Clan there is a special way of communication that does not require mating, and a woman cannot break off a marital relationship. Helen confirmed the fact that a man's seal appears only after the beginning of a marital relationship with him. After that, Julia realized that no one knew about such a special relationship and should not find out. Otherwise, if it leaked out, the males would start pestering other females, and chaos would reign in the village. The girl felt severe pain and grabbed her stomach. Brad immediately smelled the blood that was running down the female's legs. Helen couldn't explain what was happening, so she ran to call a doctor. In the meantime, Julia is at a loss as to whether it's time yet, but perhaps the decoction has disrupted her cycle and her period has begun. Only now did Brad realize that he shouldn't have forced her to drink the potion. Even if Julia had given birth to baby snakes, he would have been able to raise them. Helen returned to the room with the doctor and explained to him that the girl was fine before she drank the potion, but now she was bleeding. After examining the patient, the doctor assumed that she was pregnant, but the bleeding was not very heavy, so he concluded that everything would be fine. His voice seemed indifferent to Brad. The healer could show at least a little regret and do at least something to make her feel better, especially since they were both from the monkey clan. This news surprised the healer. He offered to give the girl some honey to ease the pain. Brad carefully placed Julia on a haystack and whispered that he would get some honey. The healer left the room after the cheetah, leaving the girl and Helen alone. For a while, Helen just sat next to her, and, having gathered her resolve, said that since Julia had already decided everything for herself, she would tell her how to break off the marital relationship. It wasn't difficult to do this. You don't even need to learn it. Women themselves feel what needs to be done when the time comes. Perhaps Julia doesn't know only because she is not familiar with this feeling. When a woman realizes that she does not feel love for a man, she cuts the marriage seal with a knife. The blood washes away the mark, and it disappears, forever breaking the connection between them. But if feelings still remain, the seal will not disappear. Julia wondered if she had feelings for Thomas. Then what did she feel for Brad? With a light movement of her hand, the girl tore the snake scale from her neck, instantly slashing her ankle. Bright red blood spread across the light skin, flooding the image of the snake, whose gaze came to life for a moment. 1,000 miles into the jungle, Thomas opened his eyes and hissed, turning his lithe body to head in the direction the seal had told him to go. Helen was shocked by Julia's action. She stared at her silently, thinking to herself that the girl must really hate the male snake, since she acted so ruthlessly. Thomas was right. After a while, the image of the snake was still clearly visible on the leg. Helen took her hand and warmly shook it, said that Julia was still a good woman. The seal had not disappeared, which meant the girl was not deprived of feelings. Since she missed even the cold-blooded outcast, Helen could be sure that she was leaving her son in good hands, but she felt guilty that gave this potion. In the evening, Brad returned in his animal form, holding a beehive the size of a plate in his teeth. Julia, lying on a straw bed, noticed streams of suspicious liquid flowing along the golden surface, the source of which could only be the mouth of a cheetah. Brad spat the catch out onto the haystack and looked at Julia's left leg, wrapped in the skin, his eyes sparkling with joy. Turning into a man, he looked impatiently, and his face was covered in bumps. Гепард с трудом выдавил из себя улыбку. К нему приходило осознание того, что Джулия любит дикаря. Все его нутро бессильно сжималось в желании убить змея. Потирая пальцами липкий мед, девушка лишь смотрела на спину убегающего Брэда, не успев сказать ему, что нужно смазать укусы медом, чтобы не занести инфекцию. At this time, Helen was carrying cotton into the room and ran into her son, who was running somewhere at breakneck speed. The upset cub told his mother about his feelings, and that Julia still loved that snake. Ласково поглаживая сына, Хелен чувствовала себя виноватой в том, что помогла избавиться от супружеской печати, но утешала его, ведь после разрыва отношений жизнь мужчины становится тяжелой. Mother explained that the marital seal is like a seed planted in a woman by her husband. It allows a man to be closer to her, but one day the seal disappears, and the man becomes like a tree without roots. From above it appears healthy, but it will no longer feel its belonging to the earth. Весь их разговор Джулия подслушивала за дверью и поняла, что супружеская печать очень важна для мужчин, но она сомневается, что хочет провести всю свою жизнь с Томасом. Lost in thoughts and feelings, she froze, holding honey dripping onto the ground in her hands. Helen advises not to put pressure on the girl, because a woman can never have only one man. This would be detrimental to fertility. Still bleeding, Julia walked out of the room and met Helen. The girl was already feeling better and wanted to see Brad. The coquettes walked ahead, discussing how tiny scratches meant nothing to a man, and behind them came the cheetah. Helen handed the cotton to her son, telling him to take care of the guest, and she left. Leaving the two of them alone, Julia's hands were all covered in honey. It would be very uncomfortable for her, so Brad offered to spread her legs so he could insert the cotton himself. This kind of help completely violated the girl's personal boundaries, so of course, she was against it. Without any embarrassment, Brad moved closer to her face and licked her cheek, reminding her that she was his woman, and he wanted to take a look. Julia pushed the cheetah away from her, telling him that he'd better get some water so she could wash her hands and do everything herself. Brad constantly called her his woman, but when Julia said that she was against it, he was surprised, because the cheetah did not care whether she had other men. Julia wanted to have only one spouse. It was important to her. She did not want to give false hopes, since she had not yet decided. He squeezed her hand tightly and reminded her how he saved her from a pack of wolves in the forest, and for that, he had the right to be her husband. But if Julia wanted to reject him, then she should break off the relationship as a spouse. The cheetah's eyes were full of determination. There was no doubt that he was serious, and he only wanted Julia. He decided not to stand on ceremony any longer and forcibly spread her legs to insert the cotton. Kicking the cheetah in the shoulder, Julia yelled at him to go away. The girl never expected that the same Brad, who once saved her from death and took care of her, would start using force. Pretending that nothing had happened, the predator went to get water so that she could wash her hands. Julia didn't care at all how Brad would cook the meat after the hunt, but she was still worried that he would go to the doctor and get all the thorns on his face removed. With a satisfied smile on his face, he was glad that the girl was worried about him, and even managed to boast that his tough skin was difficult to injure. Very soon, Brad brought water, and Julia bathed her tender and honey-sweet hands in a warm bath. Sitting on a soft mat, she called the cheetah to her to pull out the thorns that he had picked up while getting honey. Brad definitely couldn't refuse such an offer. A few seconds later, he was kneeling in front of her and admiring how cute she was. Taking out the thorns one by one, Julia commented that she could not leave the cheetah in trouble, since she was the one who caused it. Placing his hands on her waist, Brad leaned over and whispered that he was feeling much better now and was going to go hunting. Julia still had stomach pains and reminded her of Thomas. She couldn't build any relationship with Brad, so she had to avoid his care. But she couldn't survive in this world alone. By midnight, Brad returned from hunting in the guise of a man, holding the prey in one hand and the bag he found in the Camel Valley in the other. The girl couldn't believe her eyes. She wasn't happy about the food at all, but like a true woman, about her accessory. Waving a dead bird in the air, Brad emphasizes that Julia needs to eat better. She was not at all upset about losing weight, but quite the opposite. Brad leaned towards the girl's hair. The smell of the Monster King's egg had almost disappeared, and it was time to finally wash. Throwing away the food and the mirror, Julia quickly began the procedures. Raising her head, her hair floated lightly in the air. It was much better that way. Unexpectedly for the cheetah, she came up and bent down, wanting to find out if the unpleasant smell still remained. This no longer bothered Brad at all. He froze in front of her like a statue, convinced once again that she was the most beautiful woman. In a surge of emotion, the cheetah leaned down and licked the girl like a sweet candy. Пока Джулия была в бешенстве, он ответил, что запах слабенький, а монстры довольно-таки далеко, вряд ли они смогут учуять. Вечером каждый из них был занят. Джулия рисовала на лице страшненькие веснушки. А Брэд, медленно покусывая добычу, наблюдал, как она нелепо это делает. The cheetah broke off pieces and fed the girl because her hands were busy. Their idyll was broken by a loud roar. It was some kind of beast, and only Brad understood who these uninvited guests were. He called them a bunch of idiots and ran quickly. They were looking for the cheetah, and they could wake up everyone in the palace. The paws of the pack had already stepped onto the castle grounds, and some girl was sitting astride the beast. To Brad, she was familiar. Her name was Rosie. Julia didn't know, and didn't even suspect that Brad was so popular that women were waiting for him at the door of his house. Ситуация стала еще более непонятной, когда гепард сказал, что лучше всю жизнь быть одному, чем стать мужчиной Роузи. К тому же у него уже есть женщина. Pointing her finger at Julia, the guest mockingly asked if this was really his girlfriend. The freckles did their job when Rosie looked at the girl and said that Brad had bad taste because his betrothed was so ugly. The cheetah didn't care what the female was planning. He covered Julia with his broad shoulders, letting her know that he wouldn't let anyone hurt her. Rosie clearly wanted to make the cheetah look bad and told the story of how, on the day of the Three Tribes celebration, he threw her into the bushes and tore her clothes. Only because Brad saw everything, she was forced to become his woman. Продолжив свой рассказ, девушка даже заплакала. Хоть и не совсем правдоподобно, сказала, что Брэд ничего не хотел об этом знать и даже не думал спариваться, а просто играл на ее чувствах. The cheetah denied all this. He was furious, because that evening, Rosie herself tore her clothes, and he only wanted to help her up, thinking that she had tripped. Брэду никогда не нравились такие женщины. Они готовы на все ради своей выгоды, и он нужен был ей только из-за того, что достиг зрелости и стал зверем с 2 татуировками. Если Брэд не решится стать супругом для Роузи, то она грозит развязать племенную войну. В ее племени целых 2 зверя с 4 татуировками. After listening to the story from beginning to end, Julia believed Brad. That girl had obviously set him up in front of everyone. The loud conversations woke Brad's parents up to find out what had happened. They heard Rosie's threat to start a war. But no one can insult the Cheetah clan. If they decide to fight, then so be it. Brad appreciated his mother's support, realizing that battles only bring troubles. He decided to leave, because the City of Animals is a community and the war will affect everyone. The day will soon come when Brad becomes a beast with 4 tattoos, by which time Rosie will no longer have the advantage. Only now did Julia realize that the cheetah was still so young, and already so much had been placed on his shoulders, and he remained calm under this pressure. The uninvited guest realized that she had nothing more to do here. Today she would let him slip away. But this was not the end. The couple stood and watched the girl walk away, exhaling that everything was left behind. Julia didn't expect the cheetah to rush into her arms, hoping to find support. She said with relief that she believed him, and that he didn't do it. If the cheetah was capable of such a thing, he wouldn't have done so much good for Julia. Looking straight into her eyes, Brad saw that the girl felt safe next to him. It was time to leave the castle. The parents were sorry that their son was forced to leave the village and live in the stone house they had prepared. Brad happily picked up Julia in his arms, rushing to please his parents and boast that he had recently killed a monster and could buy his own house in the city. Walking past the city streets, Julia caught the glances of residents. Embarrassed and burning with shame, everyone noticed the image of a snake, which was poorly hidden by the bandage. The townspeople froze in surprise, forgetting about all their affairs and where they were going. Each one added that she must have been kidnapped by a wild male, how weak she was, and what a good husband she had since he saved her. This made Julia feel even more uneasy. She just wanted to get away from there as quickly as possible. Among the many stone houses, Brad walked up to one and opened the door, surprising the girl. The cheetah put her down on the ground, and she quickly ran to look at everything. The house was much better than the one they had lived in before, and even more comfortable than the caves. Julia was surprised by the huge bedroom, as if especially for a woman with several men. Interrupting the girl's little excursion, Brad spread a sheet on the floor and invited her to sit down. No one has lived in this house for a long time. The cheetah promises that he will return the crystal later, and from this day on, this is their home. Julia is surprised. There are many stone houses in the city, and they all look like this one because they were built many years ago by the ancestors of the cheetah. According to their customs, a woman must always sleep with all her men, and when Julia learned this, she became embarrassed. Suddenly, Brad fell to the ground and smelled something with his keen sense of smell. The smell of another man could still be smelled in the house. Having transformed into an animal, he began to fall from side to side on the floor. At first, Julia found it funny. Brad really was a male cheetah, marking his territory in every way, just like a wild animal. She even jokingly asked why he didn't mark his territory with urine. Like a child, his eyes lit up, thinking that the girl was allowing him to do this. It was no longer funny at all. Of course, Julia was against it, and told him to get out if the cheetah was going to pee all over the place. Then she remembered something and asked if he had done it in the wooden house. Brad tensed and fell silent, indicating that this meant agreement. In anger, Julia threw her purse right in his face. Now she understood why the hut smelled so strange. The whole situation was disgusting for the girl. She didn't even want to talk to the animal. A sad Brad went outside and licked his paws as he basked in the sun. By this time, the girl had already calmed down, accepted the situation, and came to the male to find out if there was bamboo nearby. Suddenly, he again took the form of a man and sat on the grass naked, answering that there was bamboo. But why did she need it? Covering herself with her hands, Julia tried not to look at Brad's naked body and reminded him that they were in public and needed to behave more modestly. Cheetah stood up and stretched to loosen up his back, not at all embarrassed by anyone, because other women don't go out in such heat. Julia still tried not to look, asking him to put on at least something and find some bamboo for her. Once again taking the cheetah's body, Brad offered to ride it to get it. The male tried to impress Julia and rushed towards his destination at great speed. Having collected the necessary materials, the girl intertwined them step by step. The result should have been a fish trap. The beast man was surprised that bamboo could be woven like that, and praised Julia, saying how talented she was. The product looked durable. Brad turned it over in his hands and could not imagine what it could be useful for. Julia suggested trying to catch the fish that live in the stream near their house. Hurrying to catch the prey, naked Brad ran, covering himself only with a wicker basket. The cheetah dived again and again in search of fish, stopping only to take a breath. The girl on the shore was eagerly awaiting the results of their joint work. The catch met all expectations. Brad was delighted and shouted, "What a catch!" "Julia is wonderful." Her eyes lit up at the sight of the large amount of prey, and she wanted to quickly light a fire and have dinner. Julia's bleeding had still not stopped, but Brad could not carry her while he was wet, so he suggested that she walk slowly while he started a fire. She felt awkward about constantly bothering Brad, and Julia wanted to do everything herself and learn to cook. As a true man, Brad considers it his duty to take care of his woman's food. Julia couldn't understand how she could reject Brad when he cared and did everything for her. Suddenly, the seal on the girl's leg seemed to come to life. The snake's eyes sparkled, as if trying to remind her of her marital relationship with the snake. The basket fell apart in Julia's hands, allowing all the loot to spill out onto the ground. The product simply fell apart from the girl's strength, leaving her in shock. After dropping the fish trap, Julia began to lose consciousness and fall, but Brad managed to catch her in time. The girl felt weak, and then their attention switched to something else. A familiar snake with long red hair suddenly appeared from the water. Thomas returned and did not go unnoticed by the locals, who immediately came running, sensing danger. As they approached the couple, everyone shouted at him to stay put, but the tetrabeast had no evil intent. He bent down and handed the clothes to Julia. The girl was surprised that the wild animal was now in the city, and it had not yet been surrounded and beaten. Thomas realized that no one was happy to see him here, except perhaps Julia, and he had to leave the city of animals. Lost in the water and in his thoughts, he realized that the cheetah was right when he said that the snake couldn't take Julia while she was in the city of animals. So now he could only take care of her from a distance. Brad honed his cooking skills, while Julia hid from the scorching sun in the shade. At such moments, when your hands are free and there is nothing to do, an incredible number of thoughts come to mind. She was tormented by doubts, since Thomas was behaving this way. Perhaps he had feelings for the girl, and it was time to break up with Brad. The males passing by saw a lonely, bored girl and decided to start a conversation with her, asking what she was cooking, because it smelled very tasty. Julia joined the conversation and, smiling sweetly, replied that she was cooking fish. This made a positive impression. The girl seemed to them to be a skilled housewife. She was glad that Brad hadn't heard this. Otherwise, there would have been a fight. But why the guys hadn't attacked the wild animal that had been here recently was still a mystery to her, and she was waiting for an answer from the strangers. It was no secret that Julia had a marital mark on her leg, and everyone concluded that he was her man. A wild male who has a mate is not interested in anything else, so there was no need to kill him. Moreover, he has 4 tattoos. Against such an opponent, they did not have a single chance. In an attempt to grow in Julia's eyes, the boys promised to protect her the next time the snake tries to kidnap her. The beastman confessed that he liked the girl and offered to be one of her men. Julia was embarrassed and blushed, seeing that he really meant business. She didn't know at all how to behave in such a situation. She started waving her hands and saying that their bodies weren't very compatible. Brad didn't appreciate the guy's persistence at all and told him not to hang around her woman. Pretending that there was no one between them, the guy continued to flirt again. Short women like Julia are just his type, despite their large size. In fact, the stranger promises to be gentle. Brad was furious when his opponent ignored his presence and continued in the same vein. To free up his hand and keep Julia busy, the cheetah gave her a wooden spatula and said the food was ready. Unexpectedly for the enemy, Brad went into action. The best defense is an attack. It's time to show off the cheetah's signature move. Using all his strength to the maximum, as if he were a feather and not a heavy giant, Brad sent him flying. The winner watched from the bank as his opponent fell like a stone to the bottom of the river. The mission to overthrow the ladies' man was accomplished. The cheetah quickly wanted to hear praise from Julia about how strong he was. Any kitten needs affection, even one as big and grown up as Brad. Returning home from a successful hunt, the cheetah walked slowly and hummed his favorite melody. On the way, he met the same wild beast with red hair, which did not give him any peace. The first thing that came to his mind was that he was heading out to look for Julia again. Evil Brad decided to find out what the wild snake was doing on their land. Thomas, pretending not to notice the cheetah, continued to move in the intended direction, further infuriating him. Brad understood that he couldn't allow the snake to see Julia and ran home as fast as he could. The girl was sitting quietly on the floor, weaving another fish trap out of bamboo, when suddenly a cheetah ran in and slammed the door shut with all its might, frightening her. The house became completely dark, and in such conditions, Julia could not continue her work. She couldn't understand why Brad was against the door being open, and to satisfy her curiosity, the girl leaned against the door and tried to listen. Not hearing anything suspicious, she was about to go to the bedroom, not wanting to take part in what was happening. Grabbing her hand, the cheetah's death grip prevented her from doing so. Brad was scared, asking not to leave him alone, making Julia even more worried and concerned that something had happened. Julia assumed that perhaps Brad saw Thomas, which is why he hugged her tightly and asked her not to leave. Without saying it out loud, she asked the cheetah for forgiveness for playing on his feelings and taking advantage of him all this time. The knock at the door distracted the couple. Opening it, the lady found a huge bag lying on the porch, painfully familiar to Brad. Julia quickly ran to look, and opening it, she was surprised at how much rice there was in it. The girl immediately guessed who the benefactor was and began looking for him, but Thomas disappeared immediately after leaving the gift. Brad remembered with sadness how he could not let her eat rice, and this wild animal brought so much for her. Throwing the bag over his shoulder, Brad, disappointed in himself, carried it into the house. In the evening, sitting by the fire, the atmosphere in the house became increasingly tense. Plucking up her courage, Julia decided to admit that she wanted to go look for Thomas. She gritted her teeth and braced herself for Brad's reaction. The cheetah even agreed to allow the wild snake to stay in their house, if only Julia would not leave him. The girl felt sorry because she wanted to have only one husband, and it was not Brad. The cheetah had no choice but to silently leave his own home, plunging headlong into his thoughts. Julia tried to stop him, but Brad didn't want to listen to anything, just so he wouldn't do something stupid. After a while, the door swung open, and a cheetah entered the house. He did not return alone. Thomas stood behind him. It had only been a few days since their last meeting, and the snake looked so sad. He clearly missed Julia. Brad couldn't just stand by and watch as a snake hugged his own woman on his property, and he had to intervene. Getting ahead of him, Thomas knocked the cheetah off its feet with one easy movement and one blow. Hearing a loud bang, Julia screamed, begging not to touch her cohabitant. The snake had no intention of living by Brad's rules and could at any moment find another place and live there with the girl. Spitting out the blood that had accumulated in its mouth, the cheetah seemed to be preparing for a counterattack. Two males are almost unstoppable when it comes to who will be the boss, but they managed to avoid a fight. The smell of burnt meat attracted Thomas's attention. Julia must have been eating only it, and it was time to cook rice. Brad was burning with anger. Julia liked the meat cooked by his hands, but Thomas stood his ground and ignored her. The girl stopped him and said that there was no need to cook rice. Dinner was already ready. The cheetah was overjoyed. He managed to wipe Thomas's nose, and he made a victorious face. At dinner, tension hung over the young people, each silently going about his own business, wanting to avoid misunderstandings or a fight. Brad was driven not so much by a desire to court Julia, although that too, but rather by a desire to wipe his rival's nose. The girl was embarrassed by such a sweet gesture. She didn't want to sit on two chairs at once, but she couldn't do anything about it. Julia was annoyed that Thomas was sitting on the sidelines while they ate dinner, so she offered the snake a taste of the tasty meat. Out of spite, Thomas took the meat from Julia's vessel, once again ignoring Brad. This provocation fully justified the snake's expectations, and very soon the cheetah was furious. After trying this culinary masterpiece, my mouth started to burn. It burned so badly that the snake urgently needed water. At this time, Brad was rolling on the floor laughing, only he understood that the same red-hot medicine was to blame for everything. The cheetah even started to feel a stomach ache. He was so happy with his successful joke that he was even planning to pour more tomorrow, so to speak, to season him to death. This little prank could be seen as revenge, because Brad's chest was still hurting from the snake's strong blow. Julia felt guilty about this, and placing her hand on his chest, asked for forgiveness. Brad said he would never leave her. She shouldn't even try to drive him away, because she needed to repay him for saving her. If she really does hate him that much, the cheetah is sure that it would be best to discuss it after they mate. Perhaps having two spouses is the only way out of the situation. While the cheetah was eating meat and thinking about nothing, Julia was going over in her head how her life with Brad in the city of animals could have turned out if Thomas hadn't dragged her into the forest. After some time, Thomas returned in the form of a snake. Julia was concerned about his condition, and Brad still felt anger towards his rival. Having once again taken the form of a man, Thomas was completely naked and shone with all his charms. While Brad was barely holding Julia back from seeing this spectacle, he himself realized that the snake had two genitals, which meant twice the chances of mating. Barely covering himself, Thomas explained that his clothes had been torn during the transformation. This harem situation is getting worse and worse all the time. To distract herself from what was happening, Julia began cleaning up, putting away all the bones left over from dinner. The cheetah snatched everything from the hands of his mistress and told her to rest while he cleaned up. The smell of the fire had completely soaked into the girl's skin and clothes, and it was time to finally wash herself in a normal bathroom. Turning around, the two guys were already expecting a spectacle, but their presence does not suit Julia at all. Pushing both men in the back, she drove them out of the room. During such a ritual, the girl should be alone with herself. The snake took control and escorted Brad out of the room, but even his presence was still unnecessary. Having found the perfect temperature, Julia was finally able to relax. But this did not last long until the snake restrained his curiosity and asked if she was hurt. Barely covering her voluminous bust with her tiny palms, Julia hesitated. The snake guessed that she was in heat. The cotton lying next to the bathtub gave her away. Brad overheard the entire conversation and added that the girl had a child, but no longer had one. Thomas didn't understand how this could be, because it was impossible. Looking at Julia, everything became clear. Covering her mouth with her finger, she tried with all her might to show that there was no need to tell anything. Thomas approached the girl and, gently stroking her hair, admired how smart she was. She breathed a sigh of relief and was glad that she had not revealed the secret of how exactly Thomas had become her husband. Brad certainly didn't expect such a reaction. Julia was forced to get rid of the child, and the snake was completely calm. Thomas was not going to despair, saying that very soon they would be able to make another cub. The girl got the impression that the males were lining up to mate with her, and Brad vehemently argues that next time he should be the one to take part in the continuation of the family line. Not wanting to listen to this nonsense, Julia threw a cloth in their faces and demanded that they get out of there. After finishing her bath, the men were waiting for her in the other room. Brad had prepared some cotton strips for her. Thomas's attention was drawn to the dirt on the girl's face, and he immediately reached out to remove it. The snake guessed that Julia made the spots on purpose so that there would not be many men around her. With Thomas, she doesn't have to worry about that. He won't let other men bother her, so she can be as beautiful as she wants. The offer was tempting, but Julia still didn't want to attract attention. Even if she chased everyone away, they would still follow her from a distance, so she decided to remain as ugly as she was now. The males began to compliment her to support her. Even with freckles, Julia was beautiful. It was approaching midnight, and it was time to face another problem. The girl had not yet decided with whom to share her bed. The cheetah jumped onto the bed, patted the soft hay, and called her to him. Thomas resolutely wrapped his tail around her body and decided that the girl would sleep next to him. A feeling of rivalry arose between the males again. Until now, the girl could not believe that they were really going to live together. Having collected her thoughts, she admitted that she didn't like the cold at all, which meant that sleeping with Thomas would be uncomfortable for her. Brad was completely unprepared for his opponent to seize the moment and strike first. Julia begged not to start a fight and agreed to sleep with the snake. She was surprised when Thomas agreed that she needed to sleep on the mat and let Brad win the fight. In the form of a cheetah, he carefully kneaded the straw with his paws, making it softer and more comfortable. Thomas settled down very close and wrapped his tail around Julia's leg. So the three of them slept until the morning. Julia had not yet finished her night's sleep when she felt something cold and wet. The girl barely opens her eyes and tries to understand what is happening. She expected to see anything, but definitely not Thomas in the form of a snake from the very morning. A loud cry rang out across the entire city, and even beyond its borders, from the stone house in which the snake, violating all personal boundaries, licked Julia. Besides the residents, Brad also woke up, trying to see with one eye what had happened. The cheetah only had time to notice how the snake's appearance changed to a human one, and how Julia was very scared. Thomas was wrong to hug the girl. He calmed her down and asked for forgiveness, while Brad stood aside and got angry. This time, the cheetah was more decisive, hugging Julia to warm her with his body heat. The snake understood perfectly well that it was still a warm season, but when the cold weather came, Julia would definitely not want to hug him. Moving away from Brad to arm's length, she assured him that everything was fine. There was just a tightness in her chest, and she just needed to let in some fresh air. Opening the doors, the weather outside was beautiful. The clear sky allowed the sun's rays to penetrate into every corner and enjoy their bright light. Everyone froze in surprise. This time of year will soon be replaced by the rainy season. We need to have time to enjoy it. This season coincides with the beginning of the female's heat cycle and means it is time for mating. Julia was already imagining her life in the future, as she was sure that Thomas would demand to mate with him. The thought that she would grow fat, that her face would shrink, that she would look like the women in the village, and that her youth would be wasted on snake babies terrified her. Brad continued to explain that the rainy season begins when the warm season ends and the cold season begins, and the rainy season begins when the cold season gives way to the warm season. The cheetah teased the curious Julia about how she could not know this. In her defense, she only replied that a woman was not at all obliged to know this, although she herself felt embarrassed about it. In order to somehow forget about the moment of shame, the girl decided to go wash herself. Julia sat on the shore, watching the fish fall into the trap she had once woven. Only now did she realize that she should have tied the rope, then she wouldn't have had to dive for them. Thomas is not afraid of the cold, but Julia probably does not know that snakes hibernate in winter, and female snakes usually die at this time of year. Then it would be best for the girl to accept the protection of the cheetah. Julia had no other choice but to ask the snake to get the fish. Thomas grabbed the basket tightly with his tail, and in an instant pulled out a trap full of fish. The girl took advantage of the moment and quickly showed the entire front of the work. When all the baskets were on the shore, Julia noticed that one of them was damaged. Thomas turned pale. It seemed like yesterday, when he was diving into the water, he heard some kind of cracking, but he did not admit it to the girl. When Julia suggested that she make a new fish trap, she refused. The baskets she had were quite sufficient. The fisherman returned home with a successful catch and hurried to please Brad. Unexpectedly, he snatched the fish from my hands and insisted that he would be the cook today. His skill was already sufficient to prepare a delicious dish. Julia was embarrassed, but she didn't argue. She had plenty of girly things to do and something to do. Thomas also did not stand aside, and very soon the fragrant dinner was ready. Everything looked so delicious and appetizing. It made my mouth water. Each of the men wanted to feed the girl their culinary masterpiece. The excellent solution of eating everything together avoided conflict between the cooks. Julia finally ate normal food after coming to this world. Even her eyes were filled with tears of happiness. The girl noted that it was best to eat something with rice and suggested that Brad try it. The cheetah shook its head and refused to eat the food that was prepared by its rival, showing disgust not only from the snake, but also from his dishes. It was no secret to anyone how much Julia loved to eat well, and she was not at all upset when the men refused to eat. She would get more. It was hard to breathe from my stuffed stomach, but what a wonderful feeling it was. The feeling of satiety. The weather was wonderful. All the city dwellers went outside to enjoy the sun, which would soon replace the rainy season. Brad thinks it's time to chop some firewood before it starts raining constantly. Julia suggested that Thomas go with the three of them. He was only too happy to help his wife. The air temperature was getting higher and higher, and this made the work much more difficult. Brad called Julia over to show her some tasty treat that was hiding in the tree. From the bark, he took out a live caterpillar, which dangled from side to side in his hands, frightening the young lady. The picky eater doesn't like this kind of food at all, so the cheetah pulled the insect into his mouth. It wasn't for nothing that he took it out. A terrified Julia insisted that Brad not do it either, to which he agreed. The girl looked at the crawling caterpillar that the cheetah had thrown to the ground and wondered if all animals ate things like that. While Brad was spending his last strength preparing firewood, Thomas came across a bird's nest full of eggs. He wrapped them in a leaf bag to present to Julia. She doubted whether she could take them, but these are the eggs of a small bird. As a rule, they do not hatch. The bird lays them every day. If the eggs are not eaten, she will break the shell with her beak and eat them herself. The nest's owner returned and, not finding her eggs, raised the alarm. She began to peck at the impudent thief right in the tail wrapped around the branch. Thomas took the bird in his hand and thought about what to do with it. Julia offered to take her home to lay eggs for them every day, and just as the men finished their preparations, she led the bird, like a pet on a leash, to her new home. The skin on the girl's feet had become very rough. She definitely needed shoes to walk in the mountains. Because of the huge pile of firewood on his back, Thomas couldn't see Julia at all. She settled herself comfortably on the kite's tail and was ready to go home. The cheetah made her a counteroffer, to sit on his shoulders on a pile of firewood. The males began arguing again about whether Julia would be more comfortable sitting on the rough wood or the icy snakeskin. The girl had already settled on Thomas's tail and did not want to change her position. She took a deep breath. Situations like this were very tiring. Pecking at the grains, the bird happily sang a melody to its new owner. While Julia was admiring the bird, an uninvited guest stood next to the gate. The same bear that had recently fought with Brad was holding a huge piece of meat covered in honey sauce. It was tempting and looked very appetizing. Delicious food is definitely Julia's weakness. It's time to join forces against a common enemy and become allies for a while. Brad distracts Julia. They also have honey at home, and he himself can cook such meat for lunch. While they were having a nice conversation, Thomas was no longer on the premises. He decided to deal with the bear, to show once and for all that he had no chance with Julia. Fear was reflected in his eyes. The snake warned that if this happened again, he would not leave the bear alive. The girl ran to save her admirer. She apologized for the men scaring the guest. Julia was so ashamed of their behavior. In the eyes of the offender, the girl looked so caring. Even though he lost, she still came to support him. Julia led her males away and said goodbye to the bear, who admired her beauty and friendliness. Returning home, Brad noted that together, they had dealt with this impudent fellow so harmoniously. Excellent work. But the snake was still unapproachable and behaved cold-bloodedly, further infuriating the cheetah. Hearing a loud roar, Brad perked up and realized that they were coming back. Suddenly, he grabbed Julia in his arms and ran towards the sound to clearly show her who he was talking about. All the residents gathered in the town square. Women were sitting on top of a huge and scary tiger, and the townspeople were looking at the guests from all sides. Julia felt an incredible amount of pressure being there and was scared. This tiger was the youngest animal with 4 tattoos in the city. Thomas whispered in her ear that his name was Sky, a mighty warrior who was a laughingstock to everyone. Julia was surprised to learn that no woman wanted to be with him because he was ugly, had a scar all over his face, and a bad character. These women Sky bought from other tribes for salt, It is a common thing for them to send out a caravan to buy women from everywhere. Brad was excited they got 5 women this year. The girl was surprised by her behavior. Perhaps she was showing jealousy. Brad had never been interested in other women, but now he looked at them with such eyes as if he had fallen in love. In their tribe, women are the most important resource, and the number of men does not matter at all. There are 488 women in total, including Julia and the 5 new arrivals, and no one has ever counted the men. But Brad guesses there are about 10,000. Now the girl understood why men here were so shameless when they courted a woman. There were so many lonely ones among them. Before everyone appeared the image of a beast man, unknown to Julia, named Brune, the king of the monkeys and the wisest in the city. Monkeys are the smartest animals, so the girl was very glad that she had not said something inappropriate when she first met Brad. The king thanked Sky with all his heart for the addition of those 5 women to the city and declared a feast in their honor. All the men are rejoicing. Everyone has the opportunity to compete for new women. The sage pointed to one of the women, calling her a fox. Her husband was killed by a wild scorpion, and thanks to Sky, she remained alive. So the tiger will become her new man. Brad had previously told Julia that no one wanted to be with a warrior, but he already had a woman. From the form of a tiger, he turned into a man whose entire body, including his face, was covered in scars. Julia still can't get used to such sudden transformations, because in the human world, it is not customary to appear naked in public. This can only be typical for perverts or something like that. Sky approached the girl with long red hair and did not inspire confidence at all. He seemed menacing and scary. The little fox hid from fear. Not only did she not want to become the tiger's wife, but she screamed at him not to come closer. The crowd seemed to laugh at him with one voice, making him look like a laughingstock in front of everyone. Already in the form of a tiger with his head held high, he leaves, while the townspeople see him off with their jokes. In Julia's opinion, the girl was too rude when she humiliated Sky in public. The women here are too spoiled. But Brad was right. Even though he has 4 tattoos, no one wants to be with him. Julia wouldn't want her daughter to be like these girls. Hearing this, Brad was already happy. He was sure that Julia would definitely give birth to a girl. While the girl was blushing with embarrassment, everyone had already gathered to watch the real spectacle, the battle of men for females. After playing a joke on the cheetah, Julia invited him to join in. Among the huge crowd, the sage noticed the young people and realized that the wild beast with 4 tattoos was sharing a woman with the king's offspring. At this time, bloody massacres had already begun. No one was going to give in, and no one spared their strength. It was not a sight for the faint of heart, so Julia couldn't watch it. The whole breakfast was about to come out. Her offer to go home was only to Brad's advantage. It wouldn't be very good if she took a fancy to someone in the square. A caring kitten, holding a spoon with honey dripping down it, offered the girl to cook something to eat. The breakfast turned out to be quite filling. The girl only needs to eat rice twice a day. As soon as Julia started eating it, the portion became twice as big, which the cheetah didn't like at all. To avoid leaving the snake alone with the female, Brad invites him to go get firewood with him, only asking for Thomas to kick his ass. But Julia had completely different plans. She needed to sort the firewood that was at home. She looked thoughtfully at the pile of firewood and tried to think of what to do with it. To carry out the planned plan, the help of a snake was needed to move one piece of wood. The logs tied with rope took up too much space. It would be great to make oil out of them. It would make cooking much easier. The tightly wound rope was impossible to manipulate. Thomas snatched it from Julia's hands and reminded her of that very incident. He felt that his wife had lost consciousness while carrying a fish trap in her hands. Hugging her, the snake explained that he had given Julia protection, but it was still too early to master this power. The girl had already managed to rejoice and dream about what kind of strong woman she could become. Only Thomas was in a hurry to upset her. Power must be used carefully. It is exhausting and should only be used in mortal danger. After a while, a tired Brad returned and brought even more firewood. Julia was sitting next to some kind of structure that was incomprehensible to him. She used millstones to extract oil from wood and filled bamboo with it, for which the cheetah hugged her and praised her, saying how smart she was. Wrapping his tail around the girl, Thomas snatched her from Brad's embrace, causing him to get angry again. At least today, the snake won't have the chance to cook rice for Julia again, because the Monkey King is throwing a feast and you can eat there for free. A great chance to brag that single men of royal blood, like Brad, can invite as many guests as they want. Even though Rosie herself might be at the feast and catch a cheetah, Julia can't refuse delicious food and therefore doesn't see anything wrong with it. He took the girl by the hands and said that the wild snake would not go with them. Only he didn't take into account that Thomas was going where Julia was going, and they wouldn't be able to be alone. And the girl herself did not want to leave her husband home alone. Brad didn't even know what to find fault with anymore. He ordered Thomas to remove his tail if he didn't want to be kicked out. Instead of shampoo, Julia washes her hair with mud, and it has become very dry, so it is not surprising that most women in this world have short hair. She barely managed to comb them and braid a beautiful braid decorated with a flower. Thomas obeyed and put his tail away, but forgot to put anything on. He approached his wife and admired her beauty, causing her to blush, not only from the naked man in front of her, but also from the compliment. Arriving at the feast, Julia noticed that most of those present were men. This was explained by the fact that many women were in heat and they had no underwear, so it was inconvenient to go outside. It was no wonder that no one asked her about it. Although the beastman had a very good sense of smell, the rainy season has started for all the residents. It will be foggy, so when the night comes, everyone is going to light a fire. Julia noticed the fruit lying nearby and asked Brad if there were any fruit orchards in town. The grown fruits are not very tasty, but these were picked in the forest last night, with a slight mockery on her face. The girl thought, "It's all because they are unfamiliar with agriculture here." Someone behind her called out to Dogji, and Julia turned around. For some reason, many people around her give such nicknames. She felt awkward. In the human world, there was one teenage boy who gave Julia the nickname Doggy. For one reason, this nickname spread throughout the school. All her friends began to call her a stupid dog. Now, whenever Julia hears that name, she turns around and thinks it's her name. But that dog was so cute. The guy noticed that the girl was looking with interest at the pet, who turned out to be his brother, and offered to make the same one, since she liked it so much. Not only Julia was surprised by this, but also her men. She heard something she shouldn't have. Thomas even thought that her name was Dogi, because she was so emotional about this name. Taking the cutie into his arms, Brad noted that the dog looked very much like Julia. For comparison, he even brought the puppy closer. This made the girl angry, and she shouted that Brad was such a bully, and that they were not alike at all, while the cheetah laughed out loud. Thomas also confirmed that they have something in common, namely cute eyes. It turned out that it was not a pet at all, but the child of a woman who snatched it from Julia's hands, saying that the guys were being rude and ill-mannered when they grabbed other people's children. The girl felt very awkward. She was just playing with him and didn't think about stealing him or anything else. Brad decided to cheer her up by saying that when Julia went into heat, they could have a bunch of babies. The girl was silent and didn't even know what to answer. It seemed that giving birth here was a reason for pride. Thomas believed that he should have children with Julia before the cheetah. The girl's throat went dry from these conversations, and Brad offered to take her to the stream. Julia refused the offer and went alone. She wanted to be alone with herself. Lost in thought, she drank too much water, and even had to ask a passerby where the toilet was. In their language, such a place was called a latrine. The man was hooked by the fact that Julia was the first to speak, and he became interested in whether the female had a husband. Behind his back, someone said that she already had 2 spouses. It was the Monkey King who told the curious man that one of them was the offspring of the Cheetah King with 2 tattoos, and the other was a wild beast with 4 tattoos. Since he is interested in Julia, he can become her husband. The master ordered him to do this, and with his menacing appearance, demonstrated that he would not accept refusal. At this time, having done all her business, Julia finally exhaled and went out onto the path. The fog became thicker and thicker, confusing the girl as to where she needed to go next. Having gone to the stream, Thomas did not see Julia anywhere there, and realized that she had disappeared. The men raised the alarm and quickly ran to search. The girl walked from side to side, not knowing what to do or where to go, and it was getting colder and colder. Suddenly, she involuntarily overheard someone talking. A male and female voice. Someone was having a dialogue about crystals.
Giving her a crystal, she would allow them to become her husband.
Looking closer, she saw Sky, who was saying that they couldn't be together and that he was just taking care of this woman because she was his brother's child. The female voice that answered that the tiger, with his ugliness, had not had a single woman by the age of 30 was painfully familiar to Julia. It was Rosie who still wanted to have a good support for her clan, and a beast with 4 tattoos would be just the thing. Reaching out her hand to Sky, she demanded that he give her the treasured crystal. But upon hearing that the tiger had already swallowed him, the girl slapped him with all her might and called him a worthless thing. It was high time to get out of there. It was not possible to leave unnoticed. The crunch of a small branch underfoot gave away the spy. Rosie recognized her. She remembered Brad's woman very well. Julia didn't know what to do or how to get out of this awkward situation. Taking Sky by the hand, she said that she had been looking for him for a long time to invite him to the feast. Even more angry, Rosie couldn't believe that this scoundrel had already stolen 2 men from her. When they had moved far enough away, the girl admitted that she had done it in order to deceive Rosie. Sky guessed Julia's plan and offered her the crystals as a gift. He suddenly shoved it straight into her mouth and forced her to swallow it. The tiger had no one to give it to, so he thanked the girl in this way for getting him out of this mess. Julia thought the man was stupid because he could give the crystals to Rosie and become her wife. Their sweet conversation was interrupted by Thomas, who had been looking for his missing item the whole time. Already sitting in the snake's arms, Julia explained that she went to the cesspool and got lost, but then ran into Sky. The girl had to pay for the gift of crystals, and she could think of nothing better than to invite him to a feast at her fire. The tiger even turned pale. It was the first time a woman had invited him. It was impossible to refuse something like that. Very soon, Brad joined the company, but besides his beloved Julia, he saw someone extra. The men were too relaxed. This tiger quickly captured her attention. Sitting around the fire, there was a strong tension between the young people. To somehow diffuse the situation, Julia offered everyone to eat well-cooked meat. Otherwise, she would eat everything herself without leaving a single piece. The girl started talking about the pretty woman from the fox tribe that Sky liked and said that she could become their matchmaker. Julia turned pale and felt embarrassed for her curiosity. The tiger saw no need for this, as he had no intention of mating for the rest of his life. Only now did she realize that she had not only dispelled Brad and Thomas's doubts that Sky was not interesting to her, but had also hurt his feelings. The same stranger whom Julia had met earlier approached their already large group, holding something appetizing in his hands. The Wolf King's child brought this piece especially for her. The girl didn't know him at all, and wasn't sure that a man should make such gestures of attention. His name was Tyler, and he admitted that he liked Julia. There were too many men hanging around, so Brad took it upon himself to get rid of the uninvited guest. Tyler realized he was not welcome there and left. The cheetah's behavior surprised Julia, but he accepted the treat only because this pork is from the family of the king of primates, which only women of royal blood can try, and it is also Brad's mother's favorite meat. Pigs are very difficult to hunt. They run in packs and never back down from anything. If you try to escape from them on a tree, they will ram the trunk. Judging by their ferocity, it was a wild boar. Despite the lack of resources, this world is generous with women, and accepting gifts from men is normal. So Julia accepted the meat and decided to save it for tomorrow. Brad called her a fool. No one keeps meat for more than a day in the summer because it goes bad. But the girl knew how to keep it fresh. You just need to generously sprinkle the meat with salt. Sitting by the fire was too hot for Thomas, so it was time to go home. Julia told Brad to stay because he hadn't eaten anything at all, and going home hungry was not an option. Finally, she and her husband will be able to be alone. Cheetah was furious. Thomas took away his only chance to be alone with Julia. Sky feared that Taylor's intentions were dictated by more than just affection. Males should guard their females better. This doesn't scare Brad at all, because the offspring of the Wolf King doesn't have a chance. But Sky's words haunted him. Perhaps Taylor wants the support of a wild snake with 4 tattoos when he becomes one of Julia's spouses. As he greedily bit into the meat, he was sure that no one from the wolf tribe was endowed with such cunning, and that Taylor must simply be persistently pursuing him out of strong affection. The night was more romantic than ever. The full moon lit the couple's way home. Thomas stopped Julia and hugged her tenderly. Such a woman deserves to be carried in arms, especially since the snake likes it. The girl felt both awkward and pleased at the same time. She understood that Thomas was very tired of this event, but he could not refuse her. For Julia's sake, he is ready to endure anything, just so that she feels good. The girl slept in Thomas's arms the whole way home. It looked very sweet and caring. Near the threshold of the house lay a bird that laid eggs for the whole family, and the animals were already ready to feast on it as soon as possible. One glance from the wild snake frightened them, and they ran away in all directions. Because of the rustling and fuss, Julia woke up. She realized that someone was trying to eat her pet. Unexpectedly for the owner, the bird pounced and began to peck. Thomas quickly grabbed her, and it seemed that because of this, she was shocked and even lost consciousness. The girl understood that the bird was behaving this way because it was hungry, and she needed to figure out what to feed it. Julia's favorite rice was to the bird's liking. Grain after grain she picked up on her way and ate it all up. In these parts, rice was a very valuable product, and feeding it to a bird was not at all reasonable. The snake claimed that the bird was omnivorous, so Julia suggested feeding it fish. Although she had suggested the idea, Thomas had to do the fishing while Julia gathered a change of clothes and went for a swim. The place near the waterfall was filled with beauty and freshness, and the roar of the water falling from a height was like a melody. The cold drops of water sliding down the curves of Julia's body brought a feeling of freshness. Julia kept her body afloat by kicking her legs. Like a pervert, Thomas spied on his wife. She was still embarrassed to show her naked body and asked not to look. Without understanding what was happening, Julia found herself underwater and was sinking closer and closer to the bottom. She didn't have enough oxygen, and her body refused to continue fighting the water element. The girl only managed to see the silhouette of Thomas, who extended his helping hand to her. The snake wrapped its tail around her and pulled her towards itself. With the kiss, Thomas not only shared air, but also used the opportunity to take the first step towards intimacy. Their bodies intertwined and swirled among the aquatic inhabitants. Having filled his stomach with food, Brad returned home. Next to the fire, naked Julia, covered with a blanket, sat on her husband's tail. Without trying to understand the situation, Brad jumped into the form of a cheetah and was ready to take revenge for what the snake did to her. Thomas subdued the cheetah with his first blow, leaving him no chance. The girl asked not to beat Brad up at any opportunity anymore. Sitting on his knees, Brad listened attentively as the snake told how Julia almost drowned while swimming. Now she is weak. The cheetah also wanted to help. There was no need for this at all, because Thomas took care of everything. Julia slept soundly all night, and closer to the morning, she woke up feeling someone's breathing. It was too unexpected to see Brad so close. The girl barely had time to move him away from her before he kissed her. Cheetah hugged her. He was just worried about Julia's condition, because she had a very high temperature and she slept for a very long time. Now everything was fine with the girl, and Brad just came to check if the temperature had gone down. Whenever Brad touched or was just too close, Julia tried to avoid it. Now she managed to do it, saying that the mistress should feed her men. The cheetah found this gesture very sweet, but Thomas had already cooked rice, despite the fact that he had been watching his wife's condition all night. The caring snake took care in advance that Julia would want to drink and brought her water. She took sip after sip so enthusiastically that even splashes flew off the glass. It was no surprise that she choked and started coughing. Julia remembered last night when Sky gave her the crystal and told her about it. The men were surprised not by the fact that he made such a generous gesture towards the girl, but by the fact that Sky single-handedly killed the monster and won the crystal. Julia tensed up and was a little confused. She had no idea what effect this valuable crystal would have. An ordinary crystal can extend the life of a beastman by 10 years. It can only be obtained from a monster that only a beast with 4 tattoos can cope with. Brad hadn't even finished his story when Thomas interrupted him and made him very angry, promising to return Sky to another one later. Julia knew that Thomas had absorbed crystals before, but she had no idea how old he might be. The snake admitted that he had swallowed only a couple of them, and as for his age, he was over 40. This didn't surprise Julia and Brad, but rather shocked them since she was only 16. Leaving all the talk behind, it was time to eat. A piece of aromatic meat clamped between the chopsticks made the cheetah drool. Brad thought that the meat that Julia cooks, fish in a pot, are the most delicious dishes, but he never imagined that it was possible to cook something tastier. Thomas sat by the fire and looked gloomy. His wife prepared some meat without pepper, especially for him, and suggested he try it. The hostess decided to please the men and cooked steamed eggs, just enough for 3. The wild snake had never eaten anything more delicious. He felt what gastronomic pleasure was. Brad grabbed the pot of delicious food and pulled with all his might to prevent the snake from getting what he liked. He didn't manage to run far. Thomas snatched the food from the cheetah's hands with his tail. What pissed Brad off the most was that Julia was on the snake's side, and wanted Thomas to enjoy the food at least this time. So the cheetah was left without food, because the pork that was given to him was hard to obtain and he could not afford to eat it. The weather outside was completely unpredictable. The sun was shining brightly in the morning, but by evening it was hidden behind thick black clouds. Julia looked out the window and nostalgically recalled her carefree past. While Brad bit into the fruit that the wolf had sent and warned her not to try it, it was too disgusting. This statement was greatly exaggerated. The girl understood that the cheetah was behaving this way because he found out that these fruits were a gift from Taylor. While Julia was thinking that she shouldn't accept gifts from other men anymore, her males again began to argue with whom she would share her bed that night. The girl had no idea what danger awaited her while she was admiring the rain. Hearing a loud cry, the males rushed to the window. Julia was frightened by the strong lightning strike, but Thomas hugged her and whispered that everything was okay. He was nearby. Brad confirmed that there was indeed someone outside, and that this needed to be checked. There was someone lying in the rain, completely soaked, at the threshold of his house. Julia dared to go out and see who the cheetah was talking to. No one expected to see Sky at their home. He was weak and only moved thanks to Brad. It was obvious that he was poisoned. Earlier, the tiger saved women from the clutches of a scorpion, and apparently this is how the enemy punished him. But not everything is so bad, because Sky has been through a lot. Only until now, the young people could not give answers to the questions of why Sky was on the street. Being poisoned, any person with common sense would have taken care of a roof over his head. Perhaps someone was deliberately trying to harm the beast with 4 tattoos. The decision was made. Julia insisted on hiding the tear. Besides, she still felt indebted for the gift of the crystal. In the middle of the night, a pack of wolves gathered outside Brad's house, howling to call their owner to come out. Julia opened the door as soon as she woke up and asked who the guest was and what he wanted at such a late hour.
Taylor, the same Klings who showered her with gifts, stood in front of us, embarrassed.
The men were on guard, and their presence quickly wiped the cute grin off the wolf's face. The Wolf King's offspring said he was just passing by, but was looking for Sky in their house. Julia asked what was wrong. No one would go outside in such weather. Taylor warned that the tiger had gone crazy when the Monkey King was treating him, and he suddenly ran out and injured many people. Having made sure that Sky was not in this house, the pack of wolves left the territory. The rainwater washed away the scent of the tiger, so they will continue to search for him until dawn. Men, in their world, don't die that easily. Brad insists on sending him back, or they might get into trouble. Julia exhaled and was glad that Sky wasn't going to die. But the best solution was to leave him for the night, and if he didn't wake up tomorrow morning, then she would need to contact his family. Brad couldn't believe they would have to keep the tiger in their home. While Thomas supported his wife in this decision, the cheetah only moved away from her. Now he will throw logs into the fire while the snake enjoys sleeping next to the girl. In the middle of the night, Julia woke up to Brad's scream. The tiger finally woke up and felt a little better. Before Julia could finish speaking, a completely naked Sky stood up and showed off all his charms. He just wanted to thank the girl for saving him, but he embarrassed her and made Brad angry and regret letting him stay. Trying to get to the bottom of the truth, the girl decided to find out what actually happened and why the tiger was lying outside unconscious. Sky collected his thoughts and said that the Monkey King wanted to kill him. It was impossible to believe. The wisest man in the city could not be a murderer, especially since he had no reason to be. It is inconceivable that the Monkey King would be capable of such a thing, even though he is secretive. It was just speculation on Sky's part, but Julia believed there was something to his words. The tiger had no choice but to return to the tribe, despite the poison that had not yet left his body.
This wasn't going to take the monkey. It wasn't that easy to kill him.
Taking the form of a tiger, he headed towards the exit. Julia was too nice to other men. They might have misunderstood it. The girl pushed away the cheetah, who had only love in his head. But it would be better if he thought about his family. It is worth discussing everything with the king of the cheetahs in order to be prepared. Brad hugged her and asked her not to worry about it. When the rain stopped, he would definitely talk to his mother. Gently touching her face, he realized that the freckles were wet and almost disappeared. It was good that Sky did not have time to see her beautiful face. The weather forecast was bleak. The rain would not stop for the next 3 months. Going outside was not possible, so there was no need to draw freckles again. While Julia was examining her teeth in the mirror and wondering what to do with her broken toothbrush, Brad crept up behind her and scared her. His smile was beautiful, All his teeth were straight and clean. The girl admired how the cheetah took care of his snow-white teeth in their unadvanced world.
While Julia examined each of his teeth, Brad explained.
All the females have bad teeth, and the girl concluded that they cannot transform, since only adult beastmen have this ability. Despite the heavy rain outside, Brad ran to his father's house, where the rose hips that his mother uses to brush her teeth are found. Julia had no time to worry about the cheetah. She still had so much work to do. While she was weaving another bamboo basket, someone called out to her on the street. Running to the door, the girl remembered her freckles, but it was too late to draw them. The guest was persistently trying to enter. She threatened him with a stick and shouted at him to leave. In the narrow doorway, Julia noticed something wrapped that looked like a gift. It was Taylor. He brought fruits that rot during the rainy season, so they are very valuable until the end of the year. Julia did not dare to accept a gift from him again. Her men were too jealous, and it was not worth giving them an extra reason. Taylor just wanted to make you happy, but he's still persistent and will continue to send gifts. It was a shame to throw away the fruit, so the girl tried to overcome her pride and accept them. But before she could extend her hand, Thomas quickly ran up to her. She shouted after her husband not to kill. Both men disappeared somewhere behind the curtain of rain. In this situation, the girl was powerless. On the riverbank, the snake calmly watched as Sky tried to catch at least a little air and not sink to the bottom. Julia finally made up her mind and ran to Thomas, begging him not to kill the wolf. Listening to his wife, Thomas took it out of the water and threw it towards the shore. The soaking wet girl managed to save the life of the king's son, and he was able to escape. Otherwise, the snake could have been in serious trouble. Julia exhaled and even saw the positives in what had happened. Now Sky would not seek a meeting with her. It was obvious from the expression on Thomas's face that he was jealous of his wife again. The couple returned home, where Brad was waiting for them. He brought the same prickly fruit that helps his mother. Having tried it in action, Julia was truly surprised. The rose hips did their job well. Thomas had seen a similar fruit before. It was growing very close, and the snake was going to dig it up. The rain was getting heavier, and the girl was worried about her husband, asking him not to leave and to wait until the downpour ended. Some time passed, and the snake still hadn't returned home, so Brad decided it was time to close the door. Julia was very worried. It was dangerous to go to the mountains in such weather. But Thomas had always lived there. It was unlikely that anything could happen to him. Cheetah didn't want to miss this opportunity when they were alone. Brad wanted to hold her close when they slept. Julia was still in heat, and Brad blamed the stupid snake, and a little bit himself for this. If she hadn't taken that potion, she would have given birth a long time ago. It was time to admit that the girl was not pregnant. It was another cycle, and the decoction only provoked it to start earlier. Brad couldn't believe this nonsense. Any male would go crazy if he heard that a girl could give birth several times a year. Julia was seriously tensed. She certainly wasn't ready to reproduce for the tribe all the time. Looking the cheetah straight in the eye, she begged him to believe her, but she didn't want to be the one constantly giving birth. While Brad was comforting the girl and promising to protect her, Thomas returned home. A snake stood in the doorway, holding a torn plant with its roots in its hands. He saw Julia in tears and was ready to deal with the offender. The girl asked to come into the house and listen to her, but the cheetah could not stay there and went out to get some air. The couple sat around the fire and talked frankly about the fact that Julia could have children at any time. For some reason, Thomas wasn't happy. The beastman would have been delighted with this news. Maybe he just doesn't like children. According to the snake, women worry too much about the fathers of their children. Julia was sad because her husband had not quite understood her correctly. The important thing was that she could give birth in any month, but everything would be over if anyone found out about it. Hugging her from behind, the snake seemed to have managed to throw stones off the girl's shoulders. She felt better hearing that Thomas would not allow anyone to enter their territory, and no one would find out anything. The husband pressed himself even closer and asked in her ear if she had stopped leaking. Julia no longer smelled of blood, and she didn't have time to say anything because Thomas took the initiative and kissed her. The inexperienced girl allowed him to take everything into his hands, including her. At this inopportune moment, Brad returned. The snake did not allow him to come even a step closer and hit the wall with its tail hard. "Bleeding!" he screamed to take his lustful hands off Julia. Brad let it slip that the girl had not yet recovered, since she caught a cold in the forest, and her period was interrupted for a long time and returned only after taking medicine. She was in a lot of pain then. Now her body is still recovering, and it would be better to postpone mating because the child may not be born healthy if she gets pregnant now. Thomas retreated, and the cheetah rushed into her arms, very worried, because during the last cycle, Julia was leaking very heavily, and it lasted only 5 days. The wild snake was very upset. It was he who was to blame for what happened, and he understood it perfectly well. There were still constant downpours outside, forcing all residents to hide in their homes. That day, Julia discovered that the bird had laid an egg and was calling Brad to come and see it. Wanting to get him out of the nest, the hen pecked the girl right in the hand. The cheetah threatened to swallow the bird if it continued to peck at its owner. Having pacified the beast, Julia saved the bird, which simply wanted to eat. The story that no hungry person has ever pooped was clearly not close to their hearts. Brad was right. The house was smelling really bad and getting dirtier. It was unpleasant and unhygienic. Julia came up with a solution to this problem. You can build a chicken coop outside. The rain wasn't that heavy, so the girl suggested that Brad go with her to make a new house for the bird. Staring at the cheetah's surprised look, Julia stepped towards the exit and ran into a man's chest. Once again, the same tailor, who still couldn't leave them alone, stood on the threshold of their house. Brad's patience was running out. The Wolf King's offspring had really gotten to him. Taylor brought a gift again. He heard that women get sick easily during the rainy season, so he collected fruits for her. Barely covering her cute freckled face, Julia didn't understand why he had come, because Thomas would not hesitate to kill him. The wolf continued to ignore Brad and talk to the girl, for which the cheetah swung his fist, but his opponent dodged the blow. He threw the fruit into Julia's hands and promised to visit her again tomorrow. Brad couldn't just leave it like that. He had to finish what he started. Taylor tried to escape, but the cheetah did not lag behind and pursued him closely. The wolf had already thought everything through in advance. He had to leave the territory of the snake with 4 tattoos. Having done this, the Wolf King's son stopped abruptly. Finally, he turned to face Brad, and very soon, something terrible was about to begin. Cheetah greatly underestimated his opponent and received serious damage. He ended up on the ground, and Taylor landed some finishing blows. There can only be one winner, and this time it wasn't Brad. Having recovered a little, the cheetah returned home. Julia was already starting to worry that he had been away from home for so long. The wolf was playing dirty and had deliberately hit her in a weak spot. Now Brad has a lot of stomach pain. Taylor probably thought that Cheetah would hide his wound from Julia. But she is different from other women. For her, defeat is not a reason for shame. The girl will hate anyone who hurts Brad. Next time he promises to take revenge. Gently touching his hand, Julia believes him, but asks him not to look for problems for himself. Now it is important not to make any sudden movements and to rest well. But Brad didn't want to look pathetic and helpless in the girl's eyes, so he decided to get down to business and continue building the chicken coop. When everything was ready, the bird was enjoying its new home until loud bangs disturbed its peace. Thomas also became curious about where this noise was coming from. Julia looked with joy at some construction that the cheetah had made. This tool was called a millstone, with the help of which you can grind rice into flour and cook even more delicious food. The girl told Brad to light a fire while she showed Thomas how the millstones worked. She tried with all her might to make the structure move. Julia had completely forgotten what Thomas had told her about her strength, so he moved in behind her and helped her continue what she had started. Their closeness drove the cheetah crazy, and he wanted more and more to burn this snake to embers. All efforts were not in vain. Soon the desired result was achieved, and the rice grains were transformed into crumbly flour. Brad, in his anger, kept throwing more and more wood on the fire until Julia called him to see what he was wasting his time building the structure for. Cheetah stared at his opponent, ignoring Julia. The girl laughed at Brad's statement that it was rice water, and the rice itself was stuck in the stones. Because that was not true, she would like to take her men into her world. Their reaction would definitely be funny. Finally, the daily showers have given way to sunny weather. Walking barefoot through the still wet grass, Julia found a crayfish. She could already imagine what they would taste like if cooked in a pot. She ran home with all her might to get her handbag. The pencil that always helped her out and created those ugly freckles, for some reason, stopped working. During the rainy season, it was very boring to sit in the house, so the girl thought in advance what she would want to do as soon as good weather came. The men were inspired by the idea of collecting tree mushrooms in the mountains and suggested that they all go together. The idea was great, but Julia's makeup was dry and she couldn't leave the house like that. Thomas decided to cheer her up. Freckles are not clothes. Everything will be fine if the snake is nearby. He will not leave alive any man who dares to even imagine himself with his wife. The cheetah was quick to remind him that it was time to go catch crayfish, since the problem with the freckles had been solved. Brad's initiative, in a sense, pulled Julia out of this awkward situation. There were a lot of crayfish by the riverbank. The girl's eyes ran wild, not knowing which one to take on right away. One by one, she tossed them into the basket Brad had brought. It is not clear why the men froze and looked at the vessel. Cheetah didn't think that Julia asked him to bring the basket specifically for catching crayfish, because he was going to put their babies in it. The girl laughed awkwardly and pushed back the crawling arthropods. Throwing out all the catch, Brad looked around, hoping that no one was paying attention to them. If you continue to collect crayfish, they will be laughed at. Snake believes that they shouldn't worry about what others think. But Brad is right. Their reputation could be seriously damaged. Julia even imagined how terrible it would look in her world. Having obtained a bowl of stone, Brad found a way out of this ridiculous situation. Julia was quite experienced in catching crayfish, so she just laughed at the cheetah's concern about not getting caught in its claws. Brad was touched and admired her. The same annoying bear came up and started a conversation. It wasn't that he was interested in what Julia was going to do with the crayfish, but rather it was just an excuse to start a conversation with her. She turned around, and her new image without freckles shocked the man. But behind the image of Julia stood a wild snake with 4 tattoos, like a werewolf. Only the heels sparkled as the bear ran away from there as fast as he could. And the girl still didn't understand why he had disappeared again so suddenly. Not because of her beautiful face. The city delighted with its beautiful view. At this hour, all the residents were on the street. It wasn't just a coincidence. The same nasty Rosie was showing off in front of everyone, sitting astride one of her men. What was surprising was not this at all, but Sky's presence in this gang. No one even believed that he had become one of its males. The 3 stood out from the crowd, and Rosie couldn't help but notice them. Julia appeared before her in a new guise. This made the girl very angry. No wonder Brad rejected her. He found such a beautiful woman in the wild. It was hard for Julia to ignore that fiery gaze. But suddenly, she noticed something. Rosie pinned a flower to her hair, as if copying Julia's hairstyle. She couldn't believe that the most popular girl in the tribe, because of her appearance, was imitating her. Perhaps she still wanted to please Brad. There was still not a single marital seal on her body. Moreover, she had a chance. Brad had not yet made Julia his wife. This was a reason to tease him, saying that he was hanging around in someone else's house. Rosie got her way when she turned to Julia. In her place, she would have asked the snake to chase away the cheetah long ago. Rosie was completely overcome with envy. She couldn't get Brad. Julia decided to take matters into her own hands. Tears rolled down his cheeks when she loudly said to the whole street that the cheetah was not with her just like that, but because his seal was on the girl's chest. Everyone around him envied him. Everyone wanted to be loved by such a girl, because the seal was located next to the heart and confirmed how dear this spouse was to the female. Having wiped everyone's nose, the young people decided not to waste their time on unnecessary people and left. One of the men supported the frustrated Rosie, promising to help her blow off steam later. The beast with 3 tattoos was very mysterious and promised not to let its owner down. Walking home in complete silence, Julia couldn't help but wonder if Thomas really didn't care what she said to Brad. She took a deep breath and became disillusioned with his feelings. But the snake misunderstood everything and took her in his arms. The road was bumpy, so he decided to carry her. Unexpectedly, on their way, they met the same bird that had run away from home. As if on Julia's command, the cheetah rushed to catch her. He was waiting for the right moment, when suddenly someone scared off the prey. The group of men didn't want a bird at all. Their target was a cheetah. Brad dodged the blow and applied a choke. He sank his fangs into the enemy's neck, leaving him no chance. A loud scream was heard throughout the city, after which the tattoo on Rosie's body began to disappear. She ordered everyone to go searching, including Sky, who sat by the fire and didn't move a muscle. He had previously made a promise to the Tiger King, in exchange for which he received protection from him, and was obliged to completely obey Rosie and do everything she said. Sky understood that they were both beasts with 4 tattoos, and it was not about protection at all, but about mutually beneficial exchange. The image of the beautiful Julia never left his head, and the tiger would not allow anyone to hurt her. Sky's presence still gave Rosie confidence, despite the fact that she considered him a useless jerk. Julia was right to worry about where Brad had disappeared to and asked Thomas to go look for him. The cheetah sat on a tree branch, and the crowd below shouted at him to come down and not be a coward. He decided to come down to earth only when Julia and Thomas found him. Right there, among the crowd of residents, Rosie appeared, along with her men. One of them pointed towards Brad, because he was the one who killed the tiger. The cheetah didn't know how to behave or what to answer in his defense. He just stood silently, afraid to make the situation worse. Rosie couldn't lose her pride and honor. The only way out for her was to kill the cheetah, and it didn't matter whether she lost another mate or not. Brad acted quite confidently. He was completely ready to defend himself, and it was even interesting to see how they would try to kill him. However, Julia was not so confident in the cheetah, so she asked Thomas for help. No one dared to fight the wild beast with 4 tattoos, so the enemies began to retreat. Only a beast with such strength could handle it. Rosie ordered Sky to take care of the snake. She was already looking forward to watching Julia suffer as she watched her men fail. Tiger couldn't launch an attack. He had promised himself under no circumstances to do anything bad to Julia. Rosie was furious. She thought it pointless to help Brad's wife, who would never love him because of his ugly appearance. The person he loves will always come first, even if Rosie is going to fight her. In this situation, she was powerless. 2 beasts with 4 tattoos were too much for her, so Rosie retreats. But now, Sky will not dare to show herself near their clan. Julia was worried about him. Now he won't be allowed back into the Tiger clan, and he's not safe again. The Monkey King might try to kill him. The Monkey King's strongest pawn is the Wolf King, who also has 4 tattoos. He won't be able to kill Sky, so the girl shouldn't worry. The tiger noticed Julia's perfectly clean face. He couldn't restrain himself and wanted to touch her. Holding the girl close to him, Thomas forbade anyone to approach her. Sky decided to leave them alone and return to the city. The snake, hugging Julia, was only concerned with whether she liked this tiger. She was so tired of the constant jealousy of her men, it was pointless to explain that the girl didn't even really know Sky, and she couldn't like him. Julia still tried to justify herself as to why she was so embarrassed, but she does not feel favorably towards the tiger, even though he had confessed his feelings to her earlier. It better be like this, otherwise Thomas would have killed the tiger right now. It started to rain. It seemed like it would rain even harder. It was time to go home. 20 days later, Julia's period started again, and as luck would have it, she ran out of sanitary pads. The men quickly caught a scent that would not allow her to hide it in any way. Every woman goes into heat during the rainy season, so no one has any extra cotton. Brad didn't have time to listen to Julia and ran to get the fur, but she would never use it because it contains a lot of bacteria. Thomas and his wife were left alone at home, and there was a lot of tension between them. Since birth, Julia has always been an obedient girl, but it is not possible to hide forever. At first, she did not accept Thomas because she never thought of him as her husband. But now that they have lived together for so long, the girl has become accustomed to this idea. Her cycle has already come, and it is time to think about reproduction. Julia said his name out loud, but as soon as the snake turned his attention to her, she froze, afraid to say anything else. Thomas couldn't understand what was going on between them. When Julia plucked up her courage, she finally said that she was ready to reproduce. Like a statue, the snake froze and could not answer. His piercing gaze made his wife regret what she had just said. Julia wanted to sink into the ground with shame. Thomas could not answer, because tears were rolling down his cheeks, which were not at all typical for a strong wild animal. He couldn't believe that his wife actually said those words. The eyes filled more and more with tears of joy. For the first time, such strong feelings took possession of the snake. Julia took his hand and repeated how much she wanted to be with him, wanted to have his children. The girl really wanted to become one family with the snake. To hear such words from his beloved wife is every man's dream. Thomas felt like the happiest beast man in the snake clan. They leaned even closer to each other to seal what they had said with a kiss. There was just one problem. The couple still lived in Brad's house. Now that Julia is about to sleep with Thomas, it would be wrong not to do the same with Brad, so it would be best to move. The snake whispered in her ear something that Julia did not expect to hear from him at all. He wanted to be first, and the cheetah should get in line. The wife experienced mixed feelings, including anger, embarrassment, and misunderstanding. Only now Julia realized that she should have guessed earlier. Everyone who shows interest in her is threatened with loss of life. but Brad is allowed to sleep in her arms every other day. Thomas had prepared in advance to share his wife with a cheetah, but since childhood, she had been instilled with the idea of monogamy, and this is why the girl is so uncomfortable. The snake asked if she wanted to have Brad's children first. Thomas allowed the cheetah to become a second spouse, but he is a snake, and greed is his essence now. Having received her confession, he wants to get her heart. The wild serpent realized that Brad had become too close to Julia. Her man had to be someone else. The girl was scared. The cheetah might get into trouble. Even though Brad was like a brother to her, it would still be better to move so as not to hurt him. Thomas gently touched her hair and promised that he would not kill him. Brad saved her life. He deserves to be her husband. The best way out of this situation is to accept the fact that Julia will have two spouses. Then no one will suffer. Thomas hugged her. He wouldn't mind mating with her, but only in front of Brad. When Julia's heat ended, it all happened. The passion between them burned much stronger than the fire lit in the house. Brad knew about everything, but he still continued to take care of Julia, cooking her soup from poultry and fish. Thomas tried to suppress any initiative on his part, wanting to look after his wife on his own. Until now, the cheetah could not believe that the snake took advantage of the opportunity when he was not at home. Leaving them alone, Thomas went hunting. Brad couldn't bring himself to ask if Julia really liked her husband that much. Only he didn't say what he wanted at all, but suggested that they start reproducing when the female was ready. It was hard for Julia to watch the cheetah beg to mate with him, so she exhaled and agreed to do it after she gave birth to Thomas's cub. Brad jumped up abruptly, his eyes filled with hope. When he silently left the room, the girl thought that she had offended him by saying something wrong. The cheetah stood frozen in the street, every cell of his body tense. A second later, all his emotions burst out. He was incredibly happy and screamed loudly. Brad was so happy that he wanted to tell everyone from his tribe as soon as possible, but he forgot that Julia was left at home all alone. Just as I turned towards my house, someone attacked me completely unexpectedly. Deep claw wounds appeared on his back, and his clothes were ruined. Brad was surrounded and had no choice but to run. The enemies had inflicted serious damage. Everything around was blurry. My head was getting heavy, and I needed to take a rest. Very quickly, the enemies caught up with him and were ready to fight. Nothing motivated him to fight for his life as much as the fact that he had not yet managed to mate with Julia. Brad couldn't afford to lose, and it was too late to back out. Unexpectedly for both of them, a tiger intervened in the fight that had not yet begun and pushed them both away. The fall finally knocked all the strength out of the cheetah, and he lost consciousness. All this time, Julia was waiting for Brad at home, thinking that she had offended him greatly. She was glad to hear the long-awaited knock on the door. Only he didn't return alone. Sky dragged him back on his back, half dead. The tiger recounted what had happened, how a group of beastmen had attacked the cheetah. For Sky, it was a great chance to stay close to Julia. He asked to be allowed to be the girl's protector, to sleep in the living room, and to leave as soon as Brad got better. Unexpectedly, Thomas was absolutely not against this arrangement. Only in Julia's head, the picture of how the males could reach mutual understanding just didn't add up. Thomas had no choice but to let Sky protect his wife while he hunted. Brad still hadn't regained consciousness. Julia was very worried about him and suggested going for a doctor. All the doctors from the monkey clan are reluctant to treat men. Besides, Rosie has blocked access to their clan. At her instigation, not a single medic will come. Julia couldn't understand why Rosie maintained a relationship with them, since the monkey clan had harmed Sky. Tiger was convinced that she needed any allies with the 4 tattoos she could get, Rosie even using her father, who obeys her in everything. Julia turned sharply towards Thomas, remembering that there were healers in the Camel Valley. She was very persistent in asking to be transformed into the form of a snake. His wife, without noticing, began to pull his clothes off. There was no time to think about this. It was urgent to save the cheetah. While Sky took care of Brad at home, the couple went out to search. The girl knocked persistently and called Lucas. Very soon the door opened, and he did not expect to see Julia again. She begged him to go with them and help the wounded Brad. After examining the cheetah, Lucas consoled everyone. The cheetah will not die. He will get better after 2 days of sleep. While he was explaining that men were not as weak as women, and that Brad would not die from this wound, the doctor was thinking about something completely different. In his eyes, she was beautiful, even more beautiful. Thomas hugged his wife from behind. Noticing that her stomach was completely flat, he decided to go hunting. This environment made Sky feel like an outsider. Only Thomas could not leave his wife alone without protection and asked Sky to stay. He is forced to take care of Julia's food, so he is forced to leave her under the protection of the tiger. The girl decided to find out how things were going in the Tiger Clan. When Rosie united with the Monkey Clan, she could target the Cheetah Clan. Sky doesn't think so. The Monkey King wants sole power and wants to destroy the Tiger Clan. Only Julia still does not understand why the Monkey King, who is a beastman with only 2 tattoos, has such power and might. Such statements made Sky doubt the girl's affiliation with the clan. Tiger exposed her. Julia is not from the Monkey Clan, but for some reason she hides her identity. Their strength is different from other clans. They do not fight. Sky pointed his finger at his head and said that the monkeys decide everything with this place. The girl did not quite understand the meaning of this gesture. Therefore, the tiger explained that in the Monkey Clan, they can do many things with their minds. Now, a lot of things fell into place when Julia heard that they could communicate with the gods. It is quite possible that they invented religion to gain public trust, just like the ancient people. If this is indeed true, then the king should have learned about Julia's origins. But this is not as important as what Sky will do and whether he is going to become the Tiger King. The beast with 4 tattoos can do this if the girl wants. Julia didn't mean it at all and didn't expect to hear such an answer. Was he really ready to become king for her? Sky may have no other choice, because if he doesn't kill Rosie's father, the Monkey King will conspire with the Wolf King to kill him. When the conversation with the tiger was over, Julia sat over Brad, who was still not awake. She sobbed and begged him to wake up. So much connected them. And despite all his pranks and stupidity, the cheetah became so close to her. Julia couldn't believe that everything could end so tragically. Thomas had already returned from hunting, and it was time to eat. With all her might, the girl tries to remain calm and believe that everything will be fine. She found it strange that a temperature-sensitive snake could cook food so deliciously. Suddenly, she was distracted from these thoughts by the rumbling of Sky's stomach, which he could not control. Julia was already safe with Thomas, so she offered to hunt with the tiger. Sky replied that he had already eaten and had nowhere else to go. All this time, Rosie did not allow him to live in the Tiger Clan's house, and he does not have the crystals to buy a new house. Julia felt awkward. Sky had given her his crystal back then during the feast, so offering the fur to keep the tiger warm was the least she could do. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas, who was worried about his wife eating. Julia was not hungry and offered to let the snake eat all the food alone. Returning to the room, she still looked sadly at the sleeping Brad, who showed no signs of life. All this time, Thomas watched as his wife exhausted herself greatly because of the stupid cheetah. He always considered it useless. Swinging his tail with all his might, he hit the lying Brad. Julia was shocked and screamed loudly. No one could have imagined that after this, Brad would wake up and start asking who he is, where he is, and why he sees stars. Perhaps the cheetah was simply sleeping all this time because he was very tired. Having come to his senses a little, Brad hugged Julia tightly because he thought that he would never see her again. Only one thing has changed, namely his face. Cheetah became a beast man with 3 tattoos. Brad rose to prominence and developed tattoos on his body after that ordeal. The girl had never seen him so cool. For the first time, he didn't start sorting things out with the snake. While the cheetah was unconscious, Thomas took care of him, because they are one family. But the cheetah's self-confidence can only be envied. He believes that Thomas is simply afraid that no one else will be able to work with him if Brad dies. Until now, he couldn't believe that the snake had let Sky into their house. It was obvious that he was here because of Julia, so it was impossible to let the tiger out of Brad's sight. Sky saved the cheetah because he is Julia's husband, and she would be sad if she became a widow. These words touched the girl so much that she even decided to offer the tiger to live with them for as long as he needed. Brad could not influence this situation in any way, so he shifted all responsibility to Thomas, on whose decision their future life together would depend. Everything turned out to be much simpler when Sky himself decided that there was no need for this. He would leave as soon as the cheetah got better. After some time, Brad's wounds healed and Sky left, even before that Julia said that Brad had another house in Camel Valley and invited him to stay there. That day, the girl suspected something was wrong when the cheetah was about to leave somewhere. When he said he was going hunting, he lied. Brad has waited too long. It's time for revenge. It is a public fact that Rosie is a very attractive woman. Now that she is pregnant, her preferences are very specific. The men hunt all day to get her the food she wants. As a father, Anthony is especially eager to please Rosie. Every day, he sends a group to the mountains to hunt. When the most crucial moment arrives, everyone freezes to attack the victim. But Brad had other plans for this hunt. His loud whistle frightened the fawn and it ran away. Anthony immediately thought that someone from his group sneezed and saved the animal from death. Everyone looked at each other and did not understand what had happened. How funny it was for Brad to watch these losers, sitting on a tree branch above. Such loud laughter did not leave the men unnoticed. They all looked to see where the sound was coming from. The culprit of the unsuccessful hunt boldly jumped from the tree. He greeted Anthony kindly, revealing that he was now a beast man with 3 tattoos. They didn't finish what they started last time when Sky intervened, so it's time to continue. Anthony ordered all men not to interfere without his command. They will have this fight one-on-one. The wolf will fight until Brad regrets it. From the very first blow, the cheetah made it clear that his strength was much greater than it had been before. After that, Brad immediately ran away. He took revenge, and that was enough. The loser gave the command not to pursue the cheetah. The serious wound was only confirmation that Brad was not the useless cheetah he had been. Thomas and Brad invited Lucas to their house. They were worried that Julia was eating too much. Her appetite had tripled. The medic couldn't tell that there was anything wrong with the girl, but everyone froze in anticipation, listening carefully to what he would say next. Lucas realized that she was just pregnant. Brad was speechless and even dropped the food he was feeding Julia. However, the girl also could not believe that she would actually have a child. The curious cheetah wanted to know how long their pregnancy lasts. Julia remembered how Thomas said that everything depended on nutrition. If there was enough food, then you could give birth in a couple of months. Looking at his wife with loving eyes, he confirmed her every word. Brad was so strong, as if he was the father of the future offspring. He decided that he needed to hurry and get more food so that Julia would give birth sooner and could mate with him. Only a few days had passed, and everyone in town knew about Julia's pregnancy. Brad messed everything up, but he was so happy that he couldn't keep the secret to himself. Someone interrupted their conversation with a knock, and Brad headed towards the door. From the doorway, the guest said that he had heard about Julia's pregnancy. His Majesty the Monkey King personally came to visit the expectant mother. The girl did not make the guest wait and left. The king noted that she was very beautiful. Even the mermaids paled in comparison to her. But Brune didn't come just to look at Julia, but to look deep into her soul. The Monkey King was shocked by what he saw.